The emergence of the Hephthalites, commonly known as the White Huns, represents one of the most complex ethnogenetic processes in Central Asian history. Archaeological excavations conducted throughout the Altai Mountains and adjacent steppe regions have yielded compelling evidence pointing to the 4th century AD as the crucial period when various nomadic groups began coalescing into what would eventually become the Hephthalite confederation. Burial sites discovered near Katanda and Pazyryk revealed distinctive grave goods including iron stirrups, composite bows with bone reinforcements, and bronze belt plaques featuring animal motifs that would later become characteristic of Hephthalites material culture. Linguistic analysis of surviving Hephthalites inscriptions, though limited, suggests an Iranian-speaking population with possible Turkic substrata influences. The Bactrian documents found at Tochi Tope and other sites in modern-day Afghanistan contain loanwords that indicate sustained contact between Iranian-speaking sedentary populations and nomadic groups employing a distinct dialect. Comparative linguistic studies reveal that Hephthalite royal names such as Toramana and Mihirakula contain elements consistent with Middle Iranian phonological patterns, specifically those found in Sogdian and Bactrian sources from the same period. The geographical distribution of early Hephthalite archaeological sites extends from the Irtysh River basin in the north to the Tian Shan foothills in the south, encompassing vast grasslands that provided optimal conditions for horse-based pastoralism. Excavations at Beryl and other Altai sites have uncovered horse burials dating to the late 4th century that demonstrate sophisticated breeding practices and the development of heavy cavalry techniques that would later prove decisive in Heptathalite military campaigns. These archaeological layers contain Chinese silk fragments, indicating participation in long-distance trade networks even during their formative period. The relationship between the Hephthalites and other contemporary nomadic confederations requires careful examination to avoid the historical conflation that has plagued earlier scholarship. Unlike Attila's European Huns, who were predominantly Turkic-speaking and maintained a more fluid tribal structure, the Hephthalites developed increasingly centralized political institutions while retaining their Iranian linguistic identity. Chinese sources, particularly the Weishu and Bei Shi chronicles, consistently distinguish between the Xiongnu and the Yeda, noting fundamental differences in their military organization, religious practices, and diplomatic protocols. The European Huns under Attila operated through a system of tributary relationships with subordinate tribes, maintaining their authority through constant raiding and the redistribution of plunder. Archaeological evidence from Hunnic burial sites in Hungary and Romania reveals a material culture heavily influenced by Germanic and Roman elements, reflecting their position as intermediaries between the classical Mediterranean world and the Eurasian steppes. In contrast, Hephthalite burial practices maintain distinctly Iranian characteristics, including the use of ossuaries and fire altars that suggest Zoroastrian or related Iranian religious influences. Contemporary sources also highlight crucial differences in military tactics between these nomadic groups. The European Huns relied primarily on light cavalry armed with composite bows, employing hit-and-run tactics that maximised mobility while avoiding prolonged engagements. The Hephthalites, however, developed heavy cavalry units equipped with lance, sword, and substantial body armour. Archaeological finds from Dilbadjin and other sites reveal iron lamella armour plates and long iron spearheads, characteristic of shock cavalry designed for direct confrontation rather than harassment warfare. The migration patterns of proto-Hephthalite groups from their Altai homeland toward Transoxiana followed established nomadic routes but occurred during a period of significant climatic and political upheaval. Paleoclimatic data derived from ice core samples and pollen analysis indicates a cooling trend beginning in the late 4th century that reduced pasture quality across the northern steppes. This environmental pressure coincided with increased Chinese military activity along the northern frontiers, particularly during the Northern Wei dynasty's consolidation efforts that displaced numerous nomadic groups westward. Archaeological evidence traces this migration through a series of temporary settlements, extending from the Balkhash region through the Isir Darya Valley. Excavations at Otrar and other sites reveal occupation layers containing artifacts that bridge the gap between early Altai material culture and later Hephthalites sites in Bactria and Gandhara. These intermediate settlements demonstrate a gradual adaptation process as nomadic groups encountered new environmental conditions and established relationships with sedentary populations. The westward movement gained momentum during the early 5th century as Hephthalite groups encountered the weakening Kushan territories in Bactria. The collapse of Kushan political authority created a power vacuum that attracted various nomadic groups seeking new pastures and opportunities for tribute extraction. Chinese sources describe this period as one of constant warfare between competing nomadic confederations, with the Hephthalites gradually establishing dominance through superior military organisation and diplomatic skill. Proto-Hephthalite social organisation during this migration period reflected the complex demands of managing large-scale population movements while maintaining military effectiveness. Archaeological evidence suggests a hierarchical structure based on extended kinship groups, each controlling specific herds and territorial segments. Burial sites from this transitional period reveal increasing wealth differentiation, with elite graves containing imported goods from China, Persia, and the Byzantine Empire, alongside traditional nomadic equipment. The traditional pastoral nomadic lifestyle of the proto-Hephthalites centered on seasonal migrations that followed established patterns of pasture utilization. Summer camps were typically located in highland areas where cooler temperatures and abundant water sources supported large herds, while winter quarters occupied sheltered valleys that provided protection from harsh weather. Archaeological surveys in the Pamir foothills have identified numerous seasonal campsites containing remains of portable dwellings, temporary corrals, and specialized equipment for processing dairy products and preparing preserved meat. However, the transition towards semi-sedentary lifestyles began even before the Hephthalites established their major political centres in Bactria and Gandhara. Contact with agricultural populations along their migration routes introduced new economic opportunities and technological innovations that gradually modified traditional nomadic practices. Excavations at Penjikent and other Sogdian cities reveal evidence of Hephthalite quarters where nomadic families maintained permanent residences while continuing to manage pastoral activities in surrounding regions. This semi-sedentary adaptation involved the development of hybrid economic strategies that combine traditional animal husbandry with agricultural production and craft specialization. Archaeological evidence from Varaksha and other sites shows Hephthalite communities establishing workshops for metalworking, textile production, and ceramic manufacture. These activities required permanent installations and skilled labour forces that could not be maintained through purely nomadic lifestyles. The political implications of this economic transformation were profound. Semi-sedentary communities required more complex administrative structures to manage agricultural cycles, coordinate craft production, and maintain trade relationships with distant partners. The emergence of Hephthalite royal centres at Balkh and Bamiyan reflected this evolution toward territorial control rather than purely tribal authority. Archaeological evidence from these sites reveals sophisticated urban planning, monumental architecture, and elaborate court ceremonies that marked a fundamental departure from traditional nomadic political organisation. Religious practices also underwent significant modification during this transitional period. While maintaining elements of traditional shamanic beliefs, Hephthalites communities increasingly adopted Iranian religious traditions that emphasized fire worship and elaborate burial rituals. The famous Bamiyan Buddha statues, though Buddhist, were created under Hephthalites patronage and reflect the syncretic religious environment that characterized their semi-sedentary centers. The military implications of semi-sedentarization were equally significant. Permanent bases allowed for the development of siege warfare capabilities and the maintenance of larger military forces than purely nomadic organizations could support. Archaeological evidence from Hephthalite fortifications reveals sophisticated defensive architecture incorporating both nomadic and sedentary military traditions. These developments would prove crucial as the Hephthalites expanded their territorial control and confronted the established powers of Sassanid Persia and Gupta India. The transformation from semi-sedentary communities to a unified political entity required the Hephthalites to overcome centuries of tribal fragmentation that had characterized Central Asian nomadic societies. Archaeological evidence from Turkmenistan reveals that by 440 AD, distinct tribal groups occupying territories from the Amu Darya to the Hindu Kush began adopting standardized burial practices, weaponry designs, and administrative seals that indicate centralized authority. Excavations at Surk Kotal have uncovered administrative buildings containing uniform weights, measures, and accounting tokens that demonstrate systematic economic coordination across previously independent tribal territories. The consolidation process involved the absorption of numerous smaller confederations through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic marriage alliances, and economic incentives. Chinese sources describe a series of campaigns between 445 and 460 AD where emerging Hephthalite leadership systematically eliminated rival claimants to regional authority. The Weishu chronicles record that these conflicts were characterized by siege warfare against fortified settlements rather than traditional nomadic raids, indicating the Hephthalites had already developed capabilities for sustained territorial occupation. Archaeological layers at Termes dating to this period reveal evidence of systematic urban reconstruction following military conquest. Building foundations showed deliberate demolition of existing structures followed by construction using standardized architectural techniques. Ceramic assemblages from these layers contain pottery styles that blend local traditions with new forms distributed across multiple sites, suggesting centralized production and distribution systems. The uniformity of these material culture changes across vast distances indicates administrative control extending far beyond simple military occupation. The emergence of recognizable Hephthalite leadership coincided with their strategic positioning along critical segments of the Silk Road network. Control of the Bamiyan Pass provided access to the lucrative trade route connecting Bactria with Gandhara and the Indian subcontinent. Archaeological surveys have identified numerous caravanserai foundations dating to the mid-5th century that demonstrate systematic infrastructure development designed to facilitate and tax commercial traffic. These installations feature standardized architectural plans with defensive walls, storage facilities, and accommodation quarters that could house large merchant expeditions. The Hephthalites implemented tribute systems that represented a significant departure from traditional nomadic raiding practices. Rather than sporadic attacks on merchant caravans, they established permanent taxation points where commercial expeditions paid fixed fees in exchange for safe passage and protection services. Bactrian documents discovered at Tochi Tope include receipts written in cursive Bactrian script that details these tribute arrangements. The documents specify payment schedules based on cargo types, with silk and precious metals subject to higher rates than bulk commodities like grain or textiles. Control of the Sogdian trade cities became essential to Hephthalite economic strategy. Archaeological evidence from Penjikan reveals Hephthhalite administrative quarters constructed adjacent to existing merchant districts. These installations contained specialized buildings for tribute collection, including secure storage facilities and workshops for evaluating precious goods. Excavations have uncovered standardized weights conforming to both Chinese and Persian measurement systems, indicating the Hephthalites adapted their taxation methods to accommodate diverse trading partners. The tribute system extended beyond simple taxation to include comprehensive protection services. Hephthalites military units established patrol routes that covered vulnerable sections of trade routes, particularly mountain passes where bandit attacks had previously disrupted commerce. Archaeological evidence from watchtower foundations along the Bamiyan-Kabul route shows systematic placement designed to provide visual communication across long distances. These installations contained signal fire platforms and storage areas for maintaining permanent garrisons. Military innovations during this period reflected the Hephthalites' transition from nomadic warfare to territorial control operations. Archaeological finds from Dilbajin include iron lance heads measuring over 2 meters in length, designed for heavy cavalry charges rather than the shorter weapons typical of nomadic skirmishing tactics. Associated armour fragments reveal lamellar construction techniques adapted from Chinese military technology, but modified for mounted combat conditions. The iron plates show evidence of specialised forging methods that produced lighter yet more durable protection than contemporary Persian or Byzantine equivalents. The development of siege warfare capabilities represented perhaps the most significant military advancement. Excavations at Balkh have uncovered foundations of workshops specifically designed for constructing siege engines. These facilities contained specialised forges for producing large iron components and timber working areas with evidence of precision carpentry techniques. Archaeological layers dating to 470 AD reveal systematic destruction of urban fortifications, followed by reconstruction, indicating the Hephthalites had acquired effective methods for reducing fortified positions. Adaptation of Sassanid military technologies occurred through direct contact with Persian forces and captured equipment analysis. Archaeological assemblages from battlefield sites along the Amu Darya contain Persian weapons and armour pieces that show evidence of systematic study and reproduction. Metallurgical analysis reveals that Hephthalite smiths successfully reverse-engineered Persian steel working techniques while adapting designs for their specific tactical requirements. The resulting weapons combined Persian metallurgy with nomadic mobility requirements, producing equipment superior to either tradition alone. Chinese military influences entered Hephthalite practice through diplomatic exchanges and mercenary service arrangements. Archaeological evidence from Turfan includes Chinese crossbow mechanisms found in Hephthalite contexts. Along with specialised arrowheads designed for these weapons, workshop remains at Bamiyan reveal production facilities for manufacturing Chinese-style crossbows using local materials and labour. These installations demonstrate systematic technology transfer rather than simple equipment importation. The integration of diverse military traditions produced tactical innovations that proved decisive in subsequent campaigns. Archaeological evidence suggests Hephthalites armies combined heavy cavalry charges with coordinated crossbow volleys and siege engine deployment. Battlefield archaeology at sites along the Sassanid frontier reveals evidence of these combined arms tactics, including cavalry charge routes marked by concentrated weapon deposits and siege positions indicated by projectile distributions around fortified locations. The establishment of the first Hephthalites royal dynasty required the creation of legitimising institutions that transcended traditional tribal authority structures. Archaeological evidence from Bamiyan reveals the construction of ceremonial complexes designed to demonstrate royal power through monumental architecture. These installations featured throne rooms with elaborate decorative programs, audience halls capable of accommodating large assemblies, and residential quarters that separated royal households from common populations. Royal burial practices evolved to emphasise dynastic continuity rather than individual warrior achievement. Excavations at Tilla Tepe have uncovered tomb complexes containing multiple generations of elite burials with consistent grave-good assemblages. These burials feature standardised royal regalia, including gold crowns with distinctive design elements, ceremonial weapons with precious metal inlays, and imported luxury goods that demonstrate extensive trade connections. The consistency of these assemblages across multiple sites indicates centralised control over royal symbolism. The development of administrative systems governing conquered territories represented a fundamental departure from nomadic political organisation. Archaeological evidence from regional centres reveals the construction of administrative complexes with specialised buildings for different governmental functions. These installations contained archives with clay tablet storage systems, treasury buildings with secure vault construction, and judicial facilities with formal audience chambers. The architectural standardization across multiple sites indicates systematic administrative planning. Provincial administration required the creation of new bureaucratic positions filled by individuals with specialized skills in taxation, legal procedures, and territorial management. Bactrian documents from administrative archives reveal the emergence of professional administrative classes distinct from traditional military or religious leadership. These officials maintained detailed records of tribute collection, population censuses, and legal proceedings using standardized administrative procedures. The complexity of these systems indicates significant adaptation of sedentary governmental practices to nomadic political structures. The integration of conquered populations required diplomatic skills and institutional flexibility that distinguished Hephthalites administration from purely exploitative occupation. Archaeological evidence reveals the continuation of local craft production, religious practices and commercial activities under Hephthalite rule. Urban excavations show minimal disruption to existing residential areas, suggesting policies designed to maintain economic productivity rather than impose radical cultural changes. This approach proved essential for maintaining control over diverse populations across vast territories. Legal systems developed to address conflicts between nomadic and sedentary populations with different customary practices. Administrative documents reveal the creation of hybrid legal codes that incorporated elements from Iranian, Indian, and nomadic legal traditions. These systems addressed property rights, commercial disputes, and criminal procedures using flexible approaches that accommodated cultural diversity while maintaining central authority. The sophistication of these legal frameworks indicates significant intellectual development within Hephthalite administrative circles. The consolidation of Hephthalite authority over Central Asian trade routes provided the necessary foundation for their most ambitious territorial expansion, the systematic conquest of Bactria and the displacement of the established Kidarite Hun confederation. By 450 AD, archaeological evidence from sites along the Amu Darya reveals intensive military preparations, including the construction of forward supply depots, weapons manufacturing facilities, and cavalry training grounds that indicate coordinated planning for large-scale operations against fortified positions. Excavations at Termez have uncovered workshop complexes dating to this period containing specialized equipment for siege warfare, including iron-working facilities capable of producing the massive projectile points and structural components required for catapult construction. The Kidarite Huns had established their dominance over Bactrian territories during the early 5th century through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic arrangements with local Kushan successor states. Their control centered on the ancient city of Balkh, which served as both administrative capital and commercial hub for trans-Hindu Kush trade networks. Archaeological layers from Balkh dating to the Kidarite period reveal extensive urban reconstruction projects, including defensive wall reinforcement, palace, complex expansion, and the establishment of mint facilities for producing standardized coinage. These developments indicate the Kidarites had successfully transitioned from nomadic raiders to territorial administrators, making their displacement a complex undertaking requiring sustained military pressure and sophisticated tactical coordination. The initial phase of Hephthalites operations against Kidarite positions began with systematic attacks on outlying settlements and trade route control points. Archaeological evidence from sites along the Bamiyan-Balkh corridor shows destruction layers dating to 455 AD, characterized by burned storage facilities, scattered weapon fragments, and hasty burial deposits containing valuable goods. These destruction patterns indicate rapid military strikes designed to disrupt Kidarite economic resources while avoiding prolonged sieges of heavily fortified positions. The Hephthalites employed their superior mobility to isolate Kidarite strongholds from mutual support, forcing defenders to rely on stored supplies while preventing reinforcement or resupply operations. The Siege of Balkh itself required innovations in assault techniques that demonstrated Hephthalite adaptation of sedentary military technologies. Archaeological excavations of the city's defensive perimeter reveal systematic attempts to undermine wall foundations through tunnelling operations, evidenced by collapsed sections with characteristic subsidence patterns and the discovery of iron mining tools in associated debris layers. Projectile distributions around the walls indicate coordinated artillery bombardments using torsion engines capable of launching stone projectiles weighing over 50 kilograms. The concentration of these projectiles near gate structures suggests targeted attacks designed to breach specific defensive points rather than general destructive bombardment. The fall of Bulk in 457 AD marked a decisive turning point in the campaign, but archaeological evidence suggests the transition occurred through negotiated surrender rather than total destruction. Excavation layers from this period show minimal urban destruction outside the immediate vicinity of military installations, while residential and commercial districts reveal continuity in occupation patterns and material culture. Administrative buildings contain archives that span the transition period, indicating the Hephthalites maintained existing bureaucratic structures while installing their own oversight personnel. This approach reflected sophisticated understanding of territorial administration requirements and demonstrated strategic thinking beyond simple military conquest. The displacement of Kedarite leadership involved systematic elimination of rival authority structures while preserving productive economic activities. Archaeological evidence from elite burial sites dating to this transition period reveals the sudden cessation of traditional Kedarite royal burial practices, replaced by simpler interments lacking the elaborate grave goods and monumental construction characteristic of earlier periods. Conversely, contemporary Hephthalite elite burials show increased wealth accumulation and the adoption of Bactrian luxury goods, indicating successful appropriation of regional economic resources. Coin hoards buried during this period contain mixtures of Kedarite and early Hephthalitic issues, suggesting currency systems remained functional during the political transition. The expansion of Hephthalite control beyond Bulk required securing the critical mountain passes that connected Bactrian territories with the Indian subcontinent and eastern trade networks. The Hindu Kush mountain system presented formidable geographical obstacles that had historically limited the scale of military operations between Central Asia and the Gandharan regions. However, these same passes represented choke points where relatively small forces could control vast commercial networks, making their capture essential for sustained territorial expansion. Archaeological surveys of pass routes have identified numerous fortified positions dating to this period, including watchtowers, supply caches and defensive walls designed to control access through specific valleys. The Bamiyan Pass, connecting the Bactrian Plateau with the Kabul River Valley, became the primary focus of Hephthalitic expansion efforts due to its central position in trans-regional trade networks. Archaeological evidence from the Bamiyan Valley reveals intensive construction activities beginning around 460 AD, including the establishment of permanent military garrisons, administrative facilities, and commercial infrastructure designed to support increased traffic volumes. The famous Buddhist monastery complexes at Bamiyan received significant patronage during this period, evidenced by construction phases that incorporated Hephthalite architectural elements while maintaining traditional Buddhist decorative programs. These developments indicate the Hephthalites recognized the strategic value of maintaining religious continuity to ensure local population cooperation. Control of the Khyber Pass required more complex operations due to existing tribal confederations that had maintained independence from both Kedarite and earlier Kushan authority. Archaeological evidence from sites along the pass route reveals evidence of negotiated agreements rather than direct military conquest, including the construction of shared defensive installations and the establishment of tribute collection points operated jointly by Hephthalitic officials and local tribal leaders. These arrangements demonstrate sophisticated diplomatic capabilities that enabled territorial expansion without the massive military commitments required for total occupation of mountainous regions. The strategic importance of controlling these mountain trade routes extended far beyond simple tribute collection. Archaeological analysis of commercial goods found at Hephthalites sites reveals dramatic increases in the volume and variety of luxury imports following their conquest of the Hindu Kush passes. Silk fragments from Chinese workshops, precious stones from Sri Lankan sources, and spices from Southeast Asian origins appear in significantly greater quantities in post-conquest archaeological layers. This evidence indicates the Hephthalites successfully integrated their territories into existing long-distance trade networks while extracting substantial economic benefits through taxation and direct participation in commercial activities. The establishment of Balkh as the primary Hephthalite capital required extensive urban reconstruction that reflected their evolving political and cultural identity. Archaeological excavations reveal systematic demolition of Kidderite palace complexes, followed by construction of new royal quarters incorporating architectural elements from multiple cultural traditions. The throne room complex featured a central audience hall with Persian-style Iwan construction, Chinese-influenced decorative tile work, and Indian sculptural elements that demonstrated the cosmopolitan character of Hephthalite court culture. Storage facilities adjacent to the palace contained standardized containers for tribute goods, suggesting systematic organization of wealth accumulation and redistribution. The administrative quarter of Hephthalite Balkh incorporated specialized buildings for different governmental functions, reflecting the complexity of territorial administration. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of treasury facilities with multiple vault chambers, archive buildings with climate-controlled storage for documents, and judicial complexes with formal courtrooms and detention facilities. The mint facility expanded significantly during this period, producing coins with a distinctly Hephthalite iconography, while maintaining weight standards compatible with existing trade networks. These installations demonstrate the Hephthalites had developed sophisticated understanding of governmental requirements for managing large territorial states. The decision to establish a secondary capital at Bamiyan reflected strategic considerations related to controlling trans-Hindu Kush communications and maintaining military pressure on Gandharan territories. Archaeological evidence from Bamiyan reveals construction of a fortified palace complex positioned to oversee the critical pass route while providing secure accommodation for royal courts during military campaigns. The complex incorporated natural cave formations enhanced with constructed facades, creating defensive positions that could withstand prolonged sieges while maintaining communication capabilities with other Hephthalite centres. Workshop areas within the complex produced military equipment and luxury goods, indicating self-sufficiency during periods of isolation. Urban planning at Bamiyan demonstrated sophisticated understanding of defensive architecture adapted to mountainous terrain. The settlement layout incorporated multiple defensive perimeters taking advantage of natural cliff formations while providing controlled access routes for commercial traffic. Archaeological surveys reveal systematic placement of observation posts throughout the valley that enabled comprehensive surveillance of approaching forces while maintaining secure communications between defensive positions. Water management systems included both defensive considerations and urban supply requirements, with underground channels that could supply the settlement during siege conditions while denying water sources to attacking forces. The integration of local Bactrian populations into Hephthalite administrative and military structures required careful balance between maintaining control and preserving productive economic activities. Archaeological evidence suggests the Hephthalites implemented policies of selective incorporation rather than wholesale population replacement. Elite Bactrian families continued to maintain substantial properties and participate in commercial activities, while administrative positions included both Hephthalites appointees and local personnel with specialized knowledge of regional conditions. Military units incorporated Bactrian cavalry specialists familiar with mountain warfare techniques, while maintaining Hephthalites command structures and strategic planning capabilities. Religious tolerance policies reflected pragmatic recognition that cultural continuity was essential for maintaining economic productivity and population stability. Archaeological evidence from Buddhist monasteries reveals continued patronage under Hephthalites rule, with construction projects that incorporated both traditional Buddhist architectural elements and decorative motifs reflecting Hephthalite cultural influences. The famous colossal Buddha statues at Bamiyan received significant investment during this period, including the construction of elaborate monastery complexes and pilgrim accommodation facilities that enhanced the site's importance as a regional religious centre. Zoroastrian communities also maintained their religious practices under Hephthalite administration, evidenced by the continued operation of fire temples and the preservation of Zoroastrian burial customs in dedicated cemetery areas. Archaeological excavations of these sites reveal minimal disruption to traditional practices, while grave goods include items of both Persian and Hephthalitic manufacture that indicate continued cultural exchange. Administrative documents written in Bactrian script include references to Zoroastrian festivals and religious observances, suggesting official recognition and accommodation of diverse religious practices. The continuation of Buddhist artistic traditions under Hephthalite patronage produced distinctive stylistic developments that reflected cultural synthesis rather than simple preservation of existing forms. Sculptural remains from Bamiyan and other sites reveal the emergence of artistic styles that incorporated Central Asian nomadic motifs with traditional Buddhist iconography. Relief carvings feature warrior figures with distinctly nomadic equipment and clothing alongside traditional Buddhist narrative scenes, indicating artistic programs designed to appeal to both local Buddhist populations and Hephthalite ruling elites. These developments demonstrate sophisticated cultural policies that maintained religious continuity while asserting political authority through artistic patronage. The Hephthalitic conquest of Bactria and establishment of territorial control over the Hindu Kush passes inevitably brought them into direct confrontation with the Sassanian Empire, whose eastern provinces had long depended on tribute relationships with Central Asian and nomadic groups rather than direct territorial administration. The initial tensions emerged around 440 AD when Hephthalitic expansion disrupted established tribute arrangements that had provided the Sassanids with regular payments from Kushan successor states and various nomadic confederations. Archaeological evidence from Merv and other eastern Sassanid cities reveals hasty defensive preparations during this period, including the reinforcement of existing walls, the construction of additional watchtowers, and the establishment of supply depots designed to support prolonged military operations in frontier regions. King Yazdegerd II, who ruled the Sassanid Empire from 438 to 457 AD, initially attempted to resolve the emerging conflict through diplomatic negotiations that would have maintained traditional tribute relationships while acknowledging Hephthalite territorial gains. Administrative documents from Ctesiphon archives, preserved in later Arabic translations, describe embassy exchanges where Sassanid officials offered recognition of Hephthalite authority over Bactrian territories in exchange for continued tribute payments and guarantees of trade route security. However, archaeological evidence from sites along the Amu Darya suggests the Hephthalites had already begun systematic military preparations that indicated their intention to expand westward into traditional Sassanid spheres of influence. The first significant military confrontation occurred in 451 AD, when Hephthalitic forces launched coordinated attacks against Sassanid frontier positions in Khorasan. Archaeological excavations at Tus and other border settlements reveal destruction layers containing scattered weapons, burned storage facilities, and hasty coin hoards that indicate rapid military strikes designed to test Sassanid defensive capabilities. The attack patterns suggest the Hephthalites employed their traditional mobility advantages to strike multiple targets simultaneously, preventing coordinated Sassanid responses while gathering intelligence about enemy military preparations and defensive weaknesses. Yazdegerd II's response demonstrated the Sassanid Empire's continued military effectiveness despite internal political pressures and resource constraints imposed by simultaneous conflicts with Byzantine forces in the west. Archaeological evidence from military production centres at Isfahan and other Iranian cities reveals intensive weapons manufacturing during this period, including the production of specialised armour designed for cavalry operations in Central Asian terrain conditions. Metallurgical analysis of recovered Sassanid weapons shows advanced steel working techniques that produced blades superior to contemporary Hephthalite equivalents, though the nomadic forces compensated for this disadvantage through superior tactical mobility and knowledge of local geographical conditions. The 453 AD campaign represented Yazdegerd II's most ambitious attempt to restore Sassanid authority over the disputed frontier regions. Contemporary sources describe a massive military expedition that included over 50,000 cavalry troops, substantial infantry formations, and a siege train equipped with the latest Roman-inspired artillery technologies. Archaeological evidence from staging areas near Nishapur reveals the scale of these preparations, including temporary workshop complexes for equipment maintenance, vast storage facilities for supplies and fodder, and specialised corrals designed to accommodate the thousands of horses required for sustained cavalry operations in desert and steppe environments. The Sassanid army's advance into Hephthalite territory initially achieved significant tactical successes through superior organisation and equipment quality. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites along the Murghab River reveals Sassanid tactical formations that effectively combined heavy cavalry charges with coordinated archery volleys and infantry support. Weapon distributions at these sites indicate the Sassanids successfully employed their famous cataphract cavalry units, heavily armoured horsemen equipped with long lances and comprehensive protection for both rider and mount. These formations proved effective in direct confrontations where their superior armour and disciplined tactics could be brought to bear against Hephthalites forces. However, the Hephthalites avoided decisive battles whenever possible, instead employing harassment tactics that exploited their superior knowledge of local terrain and climate conditions. Archaeological surveys of the campaign route reveal evidence of systematic destruction of water sources, granary facilities, and fodder supplies that forced the Sassanid expedition to rely increasingly on their own logistical resources. The nomadic forces established temporary camps in defensible positions that could be rapidly abandoned when faced with superior enemy forces, while maintaining constant pressure through night raids and attacks on isolated detachments. The decisive engagement occurred near the modern city of Herat, where geographical constraints forced both armies into direct confrontation. Archaeological excavations of the battlefield reveal evidence of complex tactical manoeuvring that lasted several days before the main engagement. The Hephthalites succeeded in drawing the Sassanid forces into a valley position where their numerical and equipment advantages could not be fully utilised. Weapon distributions indicate the battle involved intense close-quarters combat with significant casualties on both sides, but the Hephthalites ultimately prevailed through superior stamina and their ability to receive reinforcements from nearby tribal allies. The aftermath of Yazdegerd II's failed campaign marked a fundamental shift in the balance of power between the Sassanid Empire and the emerging Hephthalite confederation. Archaeological evidence from Sassanid frontier cities reveals systematic defensive improvements implemented immediately following the military defeat, including the construction of additional fortifications, the establishment of permanent garrison facilities, and the development of early warning systems designed to provide advance notice of nomadic raids. Coin hoards from this period show evidence of economic disruption as resources were diverted from commercial activities to military preparations. The succession of Perozan to the Sassanid throne in 457 AD brought renewed military pressure against Hephthalite territories, as the new king sought to restore Persian prestige through successful frontier campaigns. Peroz had gained considerable military experience during conflicts with Kedarite forces in earlier decades, and possessed detailed knowledge of Central Asian warfare conditions. Archaeological evidence from his reign reveals systematic military reforms designed to improve Sassanid effectiveness against nomadic opponents, including the development of lighter cavalry units with enhanced mobility and the adoption of composite bow technologies adapted from captured Hephthalites equipment. The renewed conflict began with Perozan's 465 AD expedition, which employed modified tactical approaches based on lessons learned from Yazdegerd II's earlier failures. Rather than attempting to occupy Hephthalites territory directly, the Sassanid forces focused on establishing fortified bases that could serve as staging areas for sustained raiding operations. Archaeological excavations at Marwal Rud and other sites reveal the construction of substantial fortress complexes designed to accommodate large cavalry forces while providing secure storage for supplies and equipment. These installations featured sophisticated defensive architecture that incorporated both Persian engineering expertise and adaptations to local environmental conditions. The Hephthalite response to Perozda's strategic modifications demonstrated their own military evolution and increasing sophistication in conducting territorial warfare. Archaeological evidence reveals the systematic development of counter-fortifications designed to neutralize Sassanid advance bases while maintaining nomadic mobility advantages. These installations featured underground storage facilities that could supply extended siege operations, along with escape routes that allowed defenders to evacuate if positions became untenable. The Hephthalites also developed specialized siege techniques adapted to desert fortress conditions, including the use of fire arrows and incendiary devices to target wooden defensive structures. The prolonged nature of this phase of the conflict produced significant innovations in military technology and tactics on both sides. Sassanid workshops began producing specialized equipment designed for extended operations in arid environments, including improved water containers, desert-adapted horse equipment, and clothing designed to provide protection from both climate extremes and enemy weapons. Archaeological analysis of Hephthalite sites reveals parallel developments, including the adoption of Sassanid metallurgical techniques for producing superior armour and weapons, along with the development of logistics systems capable of supporting larger military formations for extended periods. The economic impact of sustained warfare placed increasing pressure on both empires to achieve decisive military results. Sassanid taxation records preserved in later Islamic sources indicate substantial increases in tribute demands imposed on eastern provinces to fund continued military operations. Archaeological evidence from Hephthalites territories reveals similar economic strain, with reduced luxury imports and evidence of resource conservation measures implemented in major population centres. These pressures created incentives for both sides to seek decisive confrontations, rather than continuing the expensive pattern of raid and counter-raid that had characterised the previous decade. The climactic phase of the Sassanid Hephthalite Wars began with Perozdafin's 484 AD campaign, which represented the largest military expedition ever mounted by the Sassanid Empire against Central Asian opponents. Contemporary sources describe an army exceeding 100,000 troops, including elite guard units, provincial levies, and allied contingents from various client kingdoms. Archaeological evidence from assembly areas near Nishapur reveals the massive scale of preparations, including temporary cities constructed to house the expedition during final organisation phases. Workshop complexes produced specialised equipment, including siege engines designed for reducing nomadic fortifications and extensive supplies of arrows, lances, and other consumable military items. The Sassanid battle plan involved coordinated advances along multiple routes designed to prevent Hephthalites forces from concentrating their defensive efforts. Archaeological surveys have identified 3 primary advance corridors, each supported by substantial supply trains and equipped with independent siege capabilities. This approach reflected sophisticated strategic planning that took into account both geographical constraints and enemy tactical preferences. The central column, commanded by Perozvers personally, included the Empire's most elite military units, along with the royal war elephants that had historically proven effective against nomadic cavalry formations. The Hephthalite response demonstrated remarkable strategic coordination that united previously independent tribal groups under centralized military command. Archaeological evidence reveals the systematic preparation of defensive positions throughout the anticipated battle zones, including the construction of hidden supply caches, the establishment of communication networks using signal fires and mounted messengers, and the coordination of tribal military contributions from regions extending from the Caspian Sea to the Hindu Kush mountains. The scale of these preparations indicates the Hephthalites recognized the existential nature of the threat posed by Perros I's expedition. The decisive battle occurred in the region between Merv and Balkh, where geographical features channeled the advancing Sassanid forces into terrain that favoured Hephthalite tactical preferences. Archaeological excavations have identified the probable battlefield location based on weapon distributions, horse burial sites, and the remains of temporary fortifications constructed during the engagement. The evidence suggests a multi-day battle that began with conventional cavalry engagements, but evolved into a complex siege situation as Sassanid forces became trapped in defensive positions by coordinated Hephthalite attacks. The death of Perros I during this engagement marked one of the most significant military disasters in Sassanid history, and fundamentally altered the balance of power throughout Central Asia. Archaeological evidence from the battlefield reveals the systematic looting that followed the Sassanid defeat, with high-value items including royal regalia, ceremonial weapons, and precious metal decorations scattered across a wide area. The recovery of elephant bones from multiple locations indicates that even the famous Sassanid war elephants, symbols of imperial power, were killed during the battle or died subsequently from wounds and exhaustion. The immediate consequences of the 484 AD disaster extended far beyond simple military defeat to encompass fundamental changes in Sassanid Eastern policy and territorial administration. Archaeological evidence from major Persian cities reveals economic disruption as news of the defeat triggered hoarding behaviours, currency devaluation, and the suspension of long-distance trade relationships. Administrative documents describe emergency taxation measures implemented to fund defensive preparations, as Hephthalite forces exploited their victory through systematic raiding of previously secure Sassanid territories. The catastrophic defeat of Perros I in 484 AD left the Sassanid Empire's eastern frontiers virtually defenceless, creating unprecedented opportunities for Hephthalites expansion beyond their traditional Central Asian territories. Archaeological evidence from sites along the Kabul River Valley reveals intensive military preparations beginning in 485 AD, including the construction of forward supply bases, weapons manufacturing facilities, and cavalry training grounds specifically designed for operations in the monsoon-affected terrain of the Indian subcontinent. Excavations at Bagram have uncovered workshop complexes containing specialised equipment for producing lighter armour suitable for humid climates, along with modifications to traditional nomadic weapons that adapted them for combat against Indian military formations, employing war elephants and dense infantry phalanxes. The initial Hephthalite probes into Gandharan territories encountered a complex political landscape, fragmented among numerous local rulers who had maintained nominal allegiance to the declining Gupta Empire while exercising practical independence over their regional domains. Archaeological layers from Taxila dating to this period reveal evidence of hasty defensive preparations, including the reinforcement of existing fortifications and the establishment of emergency supply caches, suggesting local authorities recognized the growing threat from Hephthalite forces massing beyond the Hindu Kush passes. Coin hoards buried during this transitional period contain mixtures of late Gupta issues, local imitations, and early Hephthalite pieces, indicating currency systems remained functional despite increasing political instability. The conquest of Gandhara required systematic campaigns that demonstrated Hephthalite adaptation to the unique military challenges posed by Indian warfare traditions. Unlike their previous conflicts with Persian forces, which had primarily involved cavalry engagements in arid terrain, operations in the Indian subcontinent demanded new tactical approaches for dealing with monsoon conditions, river crossings, and fortified cities constructed using sophisticated engineering techniques developed over centuries of regional warfare. Archaeological evidence from siege sites reveals the Hephthalites developed specialized equipment, including waterproofed siege engines, pontoon bridge components, and drainage systems designed to maintain cavalry effectiveness during seasonal flooding. The capture of Peshawar around 490 AD marked the first major Hephthalite success in establishing permanent control over a significant Indian urban centre. Excavations reveal systematic urban reconstruction that incorporated both practical administrative requirements and symbolic demonstrations of new political authority. The existing Buddhist stupa complexes received continued patronage, evidenced by construction phases that added Hephthalite architectural elements while maintaining traditional Buddhist decorative programs. Administrative quarters featured specialized buildings for tribute collection, including secure storage facilities and workshops for evaluating precious goods received from subordinate territories throughout the Gandharan region. The expansion into Punjab territories brought the Hephthalites into direct confrontation with Gupta imperial forces for the first time, initiating a series of conflicts that would define the political landscape of northern India for the next half-century. Archaeological evidence from battle sites along the Ravi River reveals the scale and intensity of these engagements, with weapon distributions indicating large-scale cavalry battles involving thousands of participants on each side. The Gupta forces employed traditional Indian military formations, including war elephant units, disciplined infantry phalanxes, and cavalry contingents equipped with steel weapons produced in the famous metallurgical centres of central India. Toramana's emergence as the dominant Hephthalites leader during the 490 SAD coincided with systematic campaigns that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Indian political and military conditions. Archaeological evidence from his reign reveals the establishment of permanent administrative centres at strategic locations throughout conquered territories, including Sialkot, Mathura, and eventually Malwa, each featuring standardized architectural plans that facilitated efficient territorial administration. Royal inscriptions from this period, carved in both Brahmi script and Bactrian language, demonstrate Toramana's adoption of Indian royal titulature while maintaining distinctly Hephthalite cultural identity and administrative practices. The siege of Mathura in 500 AD represented perhaps the most significant military achievement of Toramana's campaigns, as this ancient city had served as a crucial stronghold controlling access routes between the Gangetic Plain and northwestern India. Archaeological excavations reveal evidence of prolonged siege operations lasting several months, with systematic approaches that combine traditional nomadic mobility with adapted siege techniques learned from previous conflicts with Persian forces. The city's eventual surrender occurred through negotiated terms that preserved much of the existing urban infrastructure, while installing Hephthalite administrative oversight, reflecting pragmatic policies designed to maintain economic productivity rather than impose wholesale cultural transformation. The integration of Mathura into the Hephthalites administrative system required careful balance between maintaining control and preserving the city's crucial role in regional trade networks. Archaeological evidence reveals the continuation of traditional craft production, including the famous Mathura sculptural workshops that had produced Buddhist and Hindu religious art for centuries. However, excavations also reveal the construction of new administrative facilities designed to accommodate Hephthalite governmental requirements, including treasury buildings with multiple vault chambers, archive facilities with climate-controlled storage for documents, and judicial complexes featuring both traditional Indian legal procedures and nomadic customary practices. The expansion of Hephthalite control throughout the Punjab region proceeded through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic arrangements, with local rulers who recognized the futility of resistance against superior nomadic military capabilities. Archaeological evidence from regional centres reveals varying patterns of political transition, with some locations showing minimal destruction layers followed by gradual administrative changes, while others reveal evidence of systematic siege operations and subsequent reconstruction under direct Hephthalite authority. These variations reflect sophisticated political strategies that adapted to local conditions while maintaining overall territorial control objectives. The establishment of tribute relationships with subordinate Indian rulers represented a significant adaptation of traditional nomadic political practices to accommodate the complex hierarchical structures characteristic of Indian political organisation. Administrative documents preserved in later Sanskrit sources describe elaborate ceremonial procedures for tribute presentation, including seasonal festivals where subordinate rulers demonstrated their loyalty through gifts of precious goods, military service commitments, and participation in religious ceremonies that legitimized Hephthalite authority, according to Indian political traditions. Archaeological evidence from these ceremonial centres reveals the construction of specialized buildings designed to accommodate large assemblies and display the wealth accumulated through tribute collection. Mihirakula's succession around 515 AD brought renewed military pressure against remaining Gupta territories, as the new ruler sought to complete the conquest of northern India through systematic campaigns against the empire's remaining strongholds. Archaeological evidence from his reign reveals significant military innovations, including the development of combined arms tactics that integrated traditional Hephthalites cavalry with Indian infantry formations and war elephant units captured from defeated enemies. Workshop complexes dating to this period show evidence of weapons production that combined nomadic metallurgical techniques with Indian steelworking expertise, producing superior equipment that enhanced Hephthalite military effectiveness. The conquest of Malwa around 520 AD represented the culmination of Hephthalite expansion into central India, bringing their territorial control to its maximum geographical extent. Archaeological excavations at Ujjain and other Malwa centres reveal systematic urban reconstruction that incorporated both administrative requirements and symbolic demonstrations of political authority. The famous astronomical observatory at Ujjain continued to function under Hephthalites patronage, with construction phases that added new facilities while maintaining the site's traditional role in Indian mathematical and astronomical scholarship. These developments demonstrate sophisticated cultural policies that preserved intellectual traditions while asserting political control through architectural patronage. The administrative integration of conquered Indian territories required the development of hybrid governmental systems that accommodated both nomadic and Indian political traditions. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of specialized administrative complexes featuring separate facilities for different cultural communities, including traditional Indian courtrooms operating according to Dharmashastra legal principles alongside nomadic judicial procedures for resolving disputes involving Hephthalite personnel. Treasury facilities incorporated both traditional Indian accounting methods and nomadic tribute collection procedures, creating comprehensive systems for managing the diverse economic resources of the expanded territorial state. The adaptation of Hephthalite military organisation to Indian conditions produced significant innovations in cavalry tactics, siege warfare, and logistics management. Archaeological analysis of weapons assemblages from this period reveals the systematic adoption of Indian steel working techniques that produce superior blade quality, while maintaining traditional nomadic weapon designs adapted for mounted combat. Armour fragments show the development of hybrid protection systems that combined nomadic lamella construction with Indian mail techniques, creating equipment suitable for both traditional cavalry engagements and the close-quarters combat characteristic of Indian warfare. The establishment of permanent garrisons throughout conquered territories required substantial modifications to traditional nomadic military organisation. Archaeological evidence from garrison sites reveals the construction of permanent barracks facilities, training grounds designed for combined arms exercises, and specialised workshops for maintaining equipment under monsoon conditions. These installations featured defensive architecture that incorporated both nomadic and Indian military engineering traditions, creating fortifications capable of withstanding siege operations while maintaining the mobility advantages that had historically characterised Hephthalite military effectiveness. The cultural interactions between Hephthalite ruling elites and Indian intellectual traditions produced remarkable developments in artistic and architectural patronage. Archaeological evidence from court centres reveals the emergence of distinctive artistic styles that incorporated Central Asian nomadic motifs with traditional Indian decorative programs. Relief sculptures from this period feature warrior figures with distinctly nomadic equipment and clothing alongside traditional Indian royal iconography, indicating artistic programs designed to appeal to both nomadic ruling elites and Indian subject populations. These developments demonstrate sophisticated cultural policies that maintained political authority while accommodating diverse aesthetic traditions. Buddhist monasteries throughout Hephthalite territories received substantial patronage that reflected both pragmatic political considerations and genuine religious interest among nomadic ruling elites. Archaeological excavations at Sarnath, Nalanda, and other major monastic centres reveal construction phases dating to the Hephthalites period that added substantial facilities while maintaining traditional Buddhist architectural forms. Inscriptional evidence indicates Hephthalite rulers participated directly in Buddhist ceremonial activities, including the dedication of new stupas, the sponsorship of scholarly activities, and the provision of economic support for monastic communities. These activities demonstrate religious tolerance policies that recognize Buddhism's importance in legitimizing political authority among Indian populations. Hindu religious institutions also received significant Hephthalite patronage, evidenced by temple construction projects and the continuation of traditional festival celebrations under nomadic political authority. Archaeological evidence from Mathura and other Hindu centres reveals temple reconstruction projects that incorporated both traditional Indian architectural elements and decorative motifs reflecting Hephthalite cultural influences. Inscriptions from this period describe royal participation in Hindu religious ceremonies, including traditional consecration rituals that legitimize nomadic rule according to Indian political theory. These developments indicate a sophisticated understanding of the religious requirements for maintaining political authority over diverse Indian populations. The economic impact of Hephthalite rule on Indian territories produced both disruptions and innovations that fundamentally altered traditional commercial patterns. Archaeological evidence reveals the systematic integration of Indian craft production into Central Asian trade networks, with substantial increases in the export of Indian textiles, precious stones, and spices to markets throughout the Sassanian Empire, Byzantine territories, and Chinese regions. Specialized workshop complexes dating to this period show evidence of production techniques that combined Indian craftsmanship with nomadic artistic preferences, creating distinctive goods designed for export to Central Asian markets. The tribute systems implemented throughout Hephthalite Indian territories represented sophisticated adaptations of traditional nomadic practices to accommodate the complex economic structures characteristic of Indian agricultural and commercial organization. Administrative documents describe seasonal tribute collection procedures that coordinated with Indian agricultural cycles, ensuring maximum economic extraction while maintaining productive capacity. Archaeological evidence from tribute collection centres reveals specialised facilities for processing diverse goods, including grain, textiles, precious metals, and exotic products, along with standardised measurement systems that facilitated trade relationships with distant partners. The establishment of Hephthalite territorial control across vast regions, extending from Central Asia to northern India, necessitated the development of sophisticated social structures that could accommodate both traditional nomadic practices and the administrative requirements of governing sedentary populations. Archaeological evidence from major Hephthalite centres reveals a hierarchical society organised around extended kinship networks, with clear distinctions between ruling elites, military specialists, religious authorities, and various categories of subject populations. Excavations at Balkh have uncovered residential quarters that demonstrate systematic social stratification, with elite compounds featuring multiple courtyards, specialised storage facilities, and elaborate decorative programs. while common residential areas contained simpler structures organised around shared communal spaces and craft production facilities. The apex of Hephthalite society centred on royal dynasties that claimed legitimacy through both traditional nomadic leadership principles and adopted elements of Persian and Indian kingship ideology. Archaeological evidence from royal burial complexes reveals the systematic development of dynastic symbolism that incorporated traditional nomadic warrior imagery with sedentary royal iconography borrowed from conquered territories. Gold crown fragments discovered at Tilla Tepe feature distinctive design elements, including stylized animal motifs characteristic of steppe artistic traditions, alongside precious stone inlays and metalworking techniques derived from Persian and Indian craftsmen. These artifacts demonstrate the synthetic nature of Hephthalite royal culture, which maintained nomadic identity while adopting prestigious elements from sophisticated sedentary civilizations. Royal court organisation reflected the complex demands of governing territories that encompass diverse cultural and economic systems. Administrative documents preserved in Bactrian archives describe elaborate ceremonial procedures that regulated access to royal audiences, with specific protocols for different categories of officials, foreign ambassadors, and tribute-bearing subordinates. Archaeological evidence from palace complexes reveals specialised buildings designed to accommodate these ceremonial requirements, including throne rooms with raised platforms for royal display, audience halls capable of housing hundreds of participants, and reception chambers equipped with facilities for displaying tribute goods and diplomatic gifts. The noble class consisted primarily of successful military commanders and their descendants, along with traditional tribal leaders who demonstrated loyalty during the conquest period. Archaeological evidence from elite residential compounds reveals substantial wealth accumulation through military service and administrative positions, with grave goods that include imported luxury items, high-quality weapons, and elaborate personal ornaments manufactured by specialized craftsmen. These burial assemblages demonstrate the emergence of hereditary aristocratic families that maintained their status through continued military service, while developing interest in trade, land ownership, and craft patronage. Military organisation formed the foundation of Hephthalite political power, with warrior classes that retained many traditional nomadic characteristics, while adapting to the requirements of territorial administration and siege warfare. Archaeological analysis of weapons assemblages reveals systematic military specialisation, with heavy cavalry units equipped with long lances, comprehensive armour protection, and specialised horse equipment designed for shock combat, while light cavalry maintained traditional composite bows and mobility-focused equipment suited for reconnaissance and harassment operations. Training facilities discovered at major centres feature specialised areas for practising different combat techniques, including mounted archery ranges, cavalry charge courses, and siege warfare training grounds. The integration of conquered populations into Hephthalite military structures produced hybrid formations that combined nomadic tactical advantages with local military expertise. Archaeological evidence from garrison sites reveals the systematic recruitment of Indian and Persian military specialists, including engineers with siege warfare experience, cavalry trainers familiar with local horse breeds, and weapons manufacturers capable of producing equipment adapted to regional combat conditions. These specialists maintained their traditional techniques while learning nomadic military practices, creating military units that possessed capabilities superior to either tradition alone. Pastoral populations continued to form the economic foundation of Hephthalite society, maintaining traditional nomadic lifestyles while contributing to the Confederation's military and economic resources. Archaeological surveys of seasonal campsites reveal the continuation of traditional migration patterns, with summer pastures in highland regions and winter quarters in protected valleys, though these movements became increasingly coordinated with the administrative requirements of territorial states. Specialised facilities at these camps include workshops for processing dairy products, preparing preserved meat, and manufacturing traditional nomadic crafts that remained important for both domestic consumption and trade relationships. The transition towards semi-sedentary lifestyles accelerated among pastoral populations located near major administrative centres and trade routes. Archaeological evidence from these transitional communities reveals the development of permanent winter settlements featuring substantial storage facilities, craft workshops, and agricultural plots that supplemented traditional pastoral activities. These settlements maintained connections with fully nomadic relatives while developing specialised economic relationships with urban centres, including the supply of horses, dairy products, and traditional crafts in exchange for manufactured goods and agricultural products. Religious practices within Hephthalites society reflected the complex cultural interactions that characterised their territorial expansion and administrative policies. Traditional shamanic beliefs remained influential among nomadic populations, evidenced by burial practices that included ritual horse sacrifices, shamanic equipment, and grave goods designed to assist deceased individuals in spiritual journeys. Archaeological excavations of nomadic cemeteries reveal the continuation of these practices throughout the Hephthalite period, with variations that incorporated new elements borrowed from contact with sedentary religious traditions. Buddhism received substantial patronage from Hephthalite rulers, who recognised its importance for legitimising their authority among Indian and Central Asian populations. Archaeological evidence from major Buddhist centres reveals extensive construction projects funded by royal patronage, including new monastery complexes, stupa renovations, and the creation of elaborate sculptural programs. The famous Bamiyan Buddha statues received significant investment during the Hephthalite period, with archaeological layers revealing construction activities that added monastery facilities, pilgrim accommodations, and defensive installations designed to protect the site during periods of political instability. Buddhist monasteries served multiple functions beyond their religious purposes, operating as educational centres, repositories for written knowledge, and focal points for commercial activities. Archaeological evidence reveals monastery complexes with specialised buildings for manuscript copying, astronomical observations, and medical training, indicating their role as centres of intellectual activity that attracted scholars from throughout the Buddhist world. Economic records preserved in monastery archives describe extensive landholdings, craft workshops, and trading relationships that made these institutions significant economic forces within Hephthalite territories. Zoroastrian communities maintained their religious practices under Hephthalites rule, with fire temples that continued to operate according to traditional Persian religious procedures. Archaeological excavations at these sites reveal minimal disruption to established religious practices, while architectural modifications incorporated defensive elements that reflected the unsettled political conditions of frontier regions. Fire altar construction dating to the Hephthalites period shows technical innovations that improved fuel efficiency while maintaining ritual requirements, suggesting adaptation to resource constraints imposed by territorial warfare and administrative demands. The syncretistic nature of Hephthalite religious policies produced distinctive cultural developments that combined elements from multiple religious traditions. Archaeological evidence from court centres reveals the construction of religious facilities that incorporated architectural elements from different traditions, including fire altars constructed according to Zoroastrian specifications within buildings featuring Buddhist decorative programs and traditional nomadic symbolic motifs. These developments reflect pragmatic religious policies designed to accommodate diverse populations while maintaining political unity under nomadic leadership. Local cult practices throughout Hephthalite territories received official recognition and support, evidenced by the continuation of regional religious festivals and the patronage of traditional sacred sites. Archaeological evidence from these locations reveals construction projects that enhanced existing facilities while adding elements reflecting Hephthalite cultural influences. Mountain shrines in the Hindu Kush region show evidence of continued ritual activities throughout the Hephthalite period, with votive deposits that include both traditional local offerings and prestige goods reflecting the wealth and cultural connections of nomadic ruling elites. Economic systems within Hephthalite territories combine traditional nomadic practices with sophisticated adaptations to territorial administration and long-distance trade management, Pastoral agriculture remained fundamental to the Confederation's economic foundation, with archaeological evidence revealing systematic improvements to traditional practices through selective breeding programs that enhanced horse quality, dairy production innovations that increased processing efficiency, and pasture management techniques that maximized carrying capacity while preventing overgrazing. Specialized facilities at major centers included veterinary treatment areas, breeding stock management compounds, and training facilities for developing superior cavalry mounts. Agricultural production expanded significantly in regions under direct Hephthalite administration, with irrigation projects that enhance productivity while providing economic resources for supporting non-agricultural populations. Archaeological surveys reveal systematic canal construction that brought previously marginal lands under cultivation, along with storage facilities designed to accumulate agricultural surpluses for redistribution during periods of shortage or military campaigns. These projects required substantial labour investments and technical expertise, indicating sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering principles and long-term economic planning. Trade monopolies represented crucial sources of revenue that funded military operations and administrative expenses, while providing access to luxury goods that enhanced royal prestige and diplomatic capabilities. Archaeological evidence from customs facilities reveals systematic taxation procedures applied to commercial traffic, with standardized measurement systems, secure storage facilities for valuable goods, and administrative procedures that documented transaction details for accounting purposes. These installations processed diverse commodities including Chinese silk, Indian spices, Persian precious metals, and Central Asian horses, demonstrating the Hephthalites' central position in transcontinental trade networks. Tribute collection systems extended beyond simple taxation to encompass comprehensive economic relationships that integrated subordinate territories into Hephthalite administrative structures. Archaeological evidence from tribute collection centres reveals specialised facilities for processing diverse goods according to standardised procedures, including workshops for evaluating precious metals, storage areas organised by commodity type, and administrative facilities for maintaining detailed records of tribute obligations and payment schedules. These systems coordinated with agricultural cycles and seasonal trade patterns to maximise economic extraction while maintaining productive capacity. The development of distinctive Hephthalite coinage represented both practical economic requirements and symbolic assertions of political authority. Mint facilities at major centres produced coins featuring royal portraits that incorporated traditional nomadic artistic elements with iconographic symbols borrowed from Persian and Indian traditions. Metallurgical analysis reveals sophisticated techniques that produce coins with consistent weight standards and precious metal content, facilitating their acceptance in international trade networks while maintaining compatibility with existing currency systems. Design elements included fire altar symbols reflecting Zoroastrian influences, Buddhist stupas indicating religious patronage, and traditional nomadic animal motifs that maintained cultural identity. Artistic achievements under Hephthalites patronage reflected the synthetic cultural environment that characterized their territorial empire. Metalworking traditions combined traditional nomadic techniques with sophisticated methods learned from Persian and Indian craftsmen, producing distinctive objects that incorporated multiple artistic traditions while maintaining recognizable Hephthalite stylistic characteristics. Archaeological evidence from workshop complexes reveals specialized production facilities for different categories of goods, including weapons with elaborate decorative inlays, jewelry featuring complex geometric patterns, and ceremonial objects designed for religious and diplomatic purposes. Textile production represented a major economic activity that supplied both domestic consumption and export markets throughout Central Asia and beyond. Archaeological evidence from production centres reveals sophisticated weaving techniques that combined nomadic wool-working traditions with silk processing methods learned from Chinese craftsmen and cotton working procedures adapted from Indian textile specialists. Dye analysis of surviving fabric fragments indicates access to expensive colorants from distant sources, including indigo from India, cochineal from Central Asia, and purple dyes from Mediterranean regions, demonstrating extensive trade connections and substantial investment in luxury textile production. The patronage of Buddhist monasteries and stupas represented both religious devotion and pragmatic political policies designed to legitimize Hephthalite rule among Buddhist populations. Archaeological evidence from these construction projects reveals substantial financial investments that funded elaborate architectural programs, sculptural decorations, and infrastructure improvements that enhanced the functionality and prestige of religious institutions. Construction techniques incorporated traditional Buddhist architectural principles with engineering innovations that reflected Hephthalites' technical capabilities and aesthetic preferences. Monastery construction projects included comprehensive facility planning that addressed both religious requirements and practical considerations related to housing large monastic communities. Archaeological excavations reveal specialized buildings for different monastic activities, including meditation halls with acoustic properties designed to enhance contemplative practices, libraries with climate-controlled storage for manuscript collections, and workshop areas where monks produced religious art and maintained manuscript copying activities. Defensive installations at these sites reflect the unsettled political conditions that required protection for valuable religious and intellectual resources. Stupa construction and renovation projects demonstrated Hephthalite commitment to Buddhist religious traditions while providing opportunities for displaying royal wealth and artistic patronage. Archaeological analysis of these monuments reveals construction phases that added elaborate decorative programs featuring sculptural narratives, precious metal inlays, and architectural innovations that enhanced both aesthetic appeal and structural stability. Relic deposits within these stupas include precious objects donated by royal patrons alongside traditional religious items, indicating the integration of political authority with religious devotion that characterized Hephthalite cultural policies. The sophisticated administrative apparatus that governed Hephthalite territories necessitated equally complex diplomatic mechanisms to manage relationships with neighbouring powers, coordinate trade networks, and maintain the delicate balance of alliances that sustained their territorial empire. Archaeological evidence from chancery buildings at Balkh and Bamiyan reveals specialised facilities designed for conducting international correspondence, including secure archive chambers for storing diplomatic documents, reception halls equipped for hosting foreign embassies, and workshops where skilled scribes produced official communications in multiple languages and scripts. These installations demonstrate the systematic approach Hephthalites rulers adopted toward international relations, treating diplomacy as an essential governmental function, requiring dedicated resources and specialized expertise. The Byzantine Empire represented the most distant yet strategically significant diplomatic partner for the Hephthalites, despite the vast geographical separation between their respective territories. Initial contact occurred through intermediary states and commercial networks, rather than direct diplomatic exchange, with Byzantine merchants and officials encountering Hephthalite representatives at trading centres throughout Central Asia and the eastern Mediterranean regions. Archaeological evidence from Sogdian cities reveals the presence of Byzantine coins and luxury goods in contexts associated with Hephthalite administrative activities, indicating commercial relationships that provided foundations for subsequent political cooperation. The shared antagonism towards Sassanid Persia created natural grounds for Byzantine Hephthalite diplomatic cooperation, as both empires benefited from coordinated pressure against their common enemy. Contemporary Byzantine sources describe embassy exchanges beginning around 520 AD, when Emperor Justin I sought to establish formal diplomatic relations with Hephthalites, rulers, as part of his broader strategy for containing Persian expansion. Archaeological evidence from Constantinople reveals the construction of specialized guest quarters designed to accommodate Central Asian diplomatic missions, featuring architectural adaptations for nomadic cultural practices, including facilities for horse care and traditional ceremonial requirements. The complexity of Byzantine Hephthalite communications required sophisticated translation capabilities and cultural mediation services. Administrative documents preserved in later Arabic sources describe the employment of Sogdian merchants and Persian refugees as interpreters and cultural advisors, reflecting the multilingual environment that characterized diplomatic exchanges between these distant empires. Archaeological evidence from diplomatic centres reveals the presence of individuals with diverse cultural backgrounds, evidenced by burial practices that incorporate elements from multiple religious traditions, and grave goods that include artefacts from throughout the known world. Military coordination between Byzantine and Hephthalite forces against Sassanid territories required careful timing and strategic planning that took into account the vast distances separating their respective operational theatres. Archaeological evidence from Persian frontier regions reveals coordinated attack patterns that suggest systematic communication between Byzantine and Hephthalites military commanders, with simultaneous pressure applied to eastern and western Persian territories that prevented effective resource concentration for defensive purposes. These operations required months of advanced planning and the maintenance of secure communication networks across thousands of kilometres of hostile or neutral territory. The exchange of military intelligence represented a crucial component of Byzantine-Hephthalite cooperation, with both empires providing detailed information about Persian military capabilities, strategic plans, and internal political developments. Archaeological evidence from intelligence gathering operations includes specialized equipment for rapid long-distance communication, secure document storage facilities, and safe houses designed to accommodate covert operatives travelling between the two empires. The sophistication of these arrangements indicates systematic intelligence cooperation that extended far beyond simple military alliance toward comprehensive strategic coordination. Commercial agreements between Byzantine and Hephthalite territories facilitated trade relationships that provided economic benefits to both empires while creating additional diplomatic ties. Archaeological evidence from trading centres reveals the establishment of permanent Byzantine commercial quarters in major Hephthalite cities, featuring specialised facilities for currency exchange, goods evaluation, and dispute resolution according to international commercial law. These installations processed diverse commodities including Chinese silk destined for Byzantine markets, Indian spices and precious stones, and Central Asian horses that were particularly valued by Byzantine military forces. The diplomatic protocols governing Byzantine-Hephthalite relations reflected the complex cultural negotiations required to accommodate the ceremonial expectations of both imperial traditions. Archaeological evidence from diplomatic reception facilities reveals architectural modifications designed to accommodate Byzantine ceremonial requirements while maintaining Hephthalite royal dignity, including throne room arrangements that provided equivalent status positioning and reception procedures that honoured both imperial traditions. These adaptations demonstrate sophisticated understanding of diplomatic etiquette that facilitated effective communication despite vast cultural differences. Chinese diplomatic relations with the Hephthalites developed through different channels and served distinct strategic purposes compared to the anti-Persian alliance with Byzantium. The Northern Wei dynasty, established by Turba tribal confederations that had successfully conquered northern China, maintained complex relationships with various Central Asian nomadic groups as part of their broader frontier management policies. Archaeological evidence from Chinese frontier regions reveals systematic diplomatic installations designed to accommodate embassies from nomadic confederations, including the Hephthalites, with specialized facilities for managing tribute presentations, conducting negotiations, and housing diplomatic missions. The Turba rulers of Northern Wei possessed intimate knowledge of nomadic political practices through their own tribal origins, enabling more effective diplomatic communication with Hephthalite representatives than had been possible during previous Chinese dynasties. Administrative documents preserved in Chinese archives describe elaborate ceremonial procedures that honoured nomadic diplomatic traditions while asserting Chinese imperial authority, reflecting sophisticated understanding of the cultural requirements for successful diplomatic relationships. Archaeological evidence from these ceremonial centres reveals architectural innovations that accommodated nomadic cultural practices within traditional Chinese imperial settings. Trade relationships form the foundation of Chinese Hephthalite diplomatic cooperation, with systematic commercial agreements that regulated the flow of goods along Silk Road networks while providing both empires with access to desired commodities. Archaeological evidence from border trading centres reveals specialised facilities for processing Chinese silk exports and Central Asian horse imports, along with administrative installations for managing taxation, quality control, and dispute resolution according to mutually agreed procedures. These arrangements required detailed legal frameworks that addressed currency exchange, transportation security, and commercial dispute resolution through diplomatic channels. The Northern Wei dynasty's involvement in Central Asian politics extended beyond simple commercial relationships to encompass strategic considerations related to controlling nomadic tribal movements and preventing hostile confederations from threatening Chinese territories. Diplomatic correspondence preserved in later Chinese sources describes systematic efforts to maintain favourable relationships with the Hephthalites as a counterbalance to other potentially threatening nomadic groups, including the Ruran Confederation, that posed direct threats to Chinese frontier regions. Archaeological evidence from Chinese military installations reveals defensive preparations that took into account the strategic implications of Hephthalites territorial expansion and military capabilities. Chinese diplomatic missions to Hephthalite territories provided valuable intelligence about Central Asian political developments while facilitating cultural exchanges that influenced both civilizations. Archaeological evidence from these diplomatic installations includes Chinese architectural elements incorporated into Hephthalites buildings, Buddhist religious artifacts reflecting Chinese artistic influences, and technological innovations that demonstrate systematic knowledge transfer between the two empires. These exchanges extended beyond simple diplomatic communication to encompass comprehensive cultural interaction that enriched both civilizations. The management of tribute relationships represented a crucial aspect of Chinese Hephthalite diplomacy, with complex protocols that balanced Chinese expectations of nominal subordination against Hephthalites' assertions of political independence. Archaeological evidence from tribute presentation ceremonies reveals elaborate procedures designed to satisfy both parties' requirements, with gift exchanges that honoured Chinese imperial dignity while avoiding implications of genuine political subordination. These arrangements required sophisticated diplomatic skills that maintained beneficial relationships while preserving both empires' essential political interests. Marriage alliances constituted fundamental diplomatic tools that created lasting political relationships between the Hephthalites and various Central Asian kingdoms, nomadic confederations, and sedentary states throughout their territorial sphere. Archaeological evidence from royal burial complexes reveals marriage relationships that connected Hephthalite ruling families with elite lineages from Sogdiana, Chorasmia, and various tribal confederations, creating kinship networks that facilitated political cooperation and military coordination. These alliances required elaborate ceremonial procedures that honoured the cultural traditions of both parties while establishing clear political obligations and mutual support commitments. The negotiation of marriage alliances involved complex diplomatic procedures that addressed issues of royal precedence, religious compatibility, and territorial arrangements. Administrative documents describe detailed negotiations concerning bride prices, ceremonial protocols, and the political status of offspring from these unions, reflecting sophisticated understanding of the long-term implications of dynastic marriages. Archaeological evidence from wedding ceremonies includes elaborate gift assemblages that demonstrate the substantial economic investments required to cement these political relationships through appropriate ceremonial display. Sogdian merchant families represented particularly valuable marriage partners for Hephthalites nobility due to their extensive commercial networks and diplomatic connections throughout Central Asia and beyond. Archaeological evidence from Sogdian cities reveals residential compounds that housed Hephthalite royal relatives alongside local merchant families, creating permanent diplomatic relationships that facilitated both political cooperation and commercial coordination. These arrangements provided the Hephthalites with access to sophisticated commercial expertise, while offering Sogdian merchants political protection and preferential trading privileges. Tribal confederations throughout the Central Asian steppes maintained marriage relationships with Hephthalite ruling families as mechanisms for establishing military alliances and territorial agreements. Archaeological evidence from nomadic burial sites reveals grave goods that include Hephthalite royal gifts, alongside traditional tribal artifacts, indicating marriage relationships that created lasting political obligations. These alliances provided the Hephthalites with access to additional military forces during major campaigns, while offering tribal leaders opportunities for sharing in the economic benefits of territorial conquest and tribute collection. The management of tributary relationships required sophisticated diplomatic mechanisms that balanced economic extraction against political stability, ensuring subordinate territories remained productive while acknowledging Hephthalite political authority. Archaeological evidence from tribute collection centres reveals systematic procedures for evaluating goods, maintaining records, and resolving disputes that arose from tribute obligations. These installations featured specialised buildings for different categories of tribute goods, including secure storage facilities, evaluation workshops, and administrative offices where detailed records documented payment schedules and compliance monitoring. Khwarezmian kingdoms maintained complex tributary relationships with Hephthalite authorities that evolved over time from simple tribute payments toward comprehensive political integration. Archaeological evidence from Khwarezmian cities reveals Hephthalites administrative quarters established alongside existing governmental institutions, creating hybrid administrative systems that combined local expertise with nomadic oversight capabilities. These arrangements allowed Khwarezmian rulers to maintain internal autonomy while acknowledging Hephthalites political supremacy through regular tribute payments and military service obligations. The integration of Bactrian territories into Hephthalites tributary systems required careful accommodation of existing political structures and commercial relationships that had developed over centuries of regional autonomy. Archaeological evidence reveals the continuation of local administrative practices under Hephthalite oversight, with tribute collection procedures that coordinated with traditional agricultural cycles and commercial patterns. These arrangements preserved economic productivity while ensuring systematic resource extraction that supported Hephthalite military operations and territorial administration. Trade diplomacy represented perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Hephthalites international relations, requiring coordination with multiple partners across vast distances while maintaining security for commercial traffic and ensuring profitable taxation of trade goods. The Hephthalites' strategic position along major Silk Road routes provided them with unprecedented opportunities for economic diplomacy, but also required complex negotiations with the various powers that possessed interests in maintaining commercial access to these crucial networks. Archaeological evidence from trading centres reveals specialised diplomatic installations designed specifically for managing commercial relationships, including facilities for hosting merchant delegations, resolving trade disputes, and negotiating commercial agreements. The role of Hephthalite territories as intermediaries between East and West required systematic coordination with Chinese, Persian, Indian, and Byzantine commercial interests. Archaeological evidence from major trading centres reveals the presence of permanent commercial quarters for different cultural groups, each equipped with facilities appropriate to their specific business practices and cultural requirements. These installations included temples and religious facilities for various faiths, specialised storage areas for different types of goods, and administrative offices where commercial disputes could be resolved according to internationally recognised procedures. Sogdian merchants served as crucial intermediaries in Hephthalites trade diplomacy, providing linguistic expertise, cultural knowledge, and commercial connections that facilitated relationships with distant trading partners. Archaeological evidence from Sogdian commercial installations reveals the systematic integration of these merchant communities into Hephthalite administrative structures, with specialized positions that combined commercial expertise with diplomatic responsibilities. These arrangements created permanent diplomatic channels that maintained commercial relationships even during periods of political tension or military conflict. The security arrangements required for protecting long-distance trade routes necessitated diplomatic agreements with numerous local authorities along commercial corridors extending from China to the Mediterranean regions. Archaeological evidence from these routes reveals systematic placement of military installations, diplomatic stations, and commercial facilities that provided comprehensive security coverage while facilitating efficient goods movement. These arrangements required ongoing diplomatic maintenance to ensure continued cooperation from local authorities and prevent disruption of commercial traffic through territorial disputes or bandit activities. The management of tribute relationships and commercial networks that had sustained Hephthalite power for over half a century began showing signs of strain by the 540 SAD, as the Confederation's territorial overextension created administrative burdens that exceeded their organisational capabilities. Archaeological evidence from major Hephthalite centres reveals declining investment in infrastructure maintenance during this period, with irrigation systems showing evidence of neglect, defensive fortifications requiring emergency repairs, and urban facilities displaying reduced construction activity compared to the prosperous decades of the early 6th century. Simultaneously, the emergence of the Western Turkic Khaganate as a unified military force in the eastern steppes created unprecedented pressure on Hephthalite territories from directions that had previously remained secure. The Western Turkic Confederation represented a fundamentally different type of nomadic organisation compared to the tribal groups the Hephthalites had previously encountered or absorbed. Archaeological evidence from Turkic burial sites reveals sophisticated metallurgical capabilities, standardized military equipment, and burial practices indicating centralized political authority that extended across vast territories from the Altai Mountains to the Caspian Sea region. Unlike earlier nomadic confederations that relied primarily on traditional tribal leadership structures, the Turkic Khaganate had developed institutional mechanisms for coordinating military operations across multiple tribal groups while maintaining unified command structures that could execute complex strategic plans over extended time periods. The initial Turkic probes into Hephthalite territory began around 545 AD with systematic raids against outlying settlements and tribute collection points along the Confederation's eastern frontiers. Archaeological layers from this period reveal destruction patterns consistent with highly mobile cavalry forces employing superior tactical coordination, with burned storage facilities, scattered defensive equipment, and evidence of rapid withdrawal that prevented effective Hephthalite counterattacks. The Turkic forces demonstrated particular expertise in disrupting communication networks and supply lines, targeting the administrative infrastructure that had enabled Hephthhalite territorial control rather than attempting direct confrontation with major defensive installations. Simultaneously, the Sassanid Empire under Khosrow had recovered from the catastrophic defeats of the previous century through systematic military reforms and territorial reorganization that restored Persian capabilities for offensive operations against their eastern neighbours. Archaeological evidence from Sassanid military installations reveals extensive rearmament programs that incorporated technological innovations learned from previous conflicts with nomadic forces, including improved cavalry equipment, enhanced siege warfare capabilities, and logistical systems designed to support extended campaigns in Central Asian terrain conditions. The Persian recovery coincided with internal Hephthalite weaknesses that created unprecedented opportunities for reversing the territorial losses sustained during the reign of Peroz I. The formation of the crucial Turkic-Sassanid alliance emerged from pragmatic strategic calculations rather than cultural affinity or ideological compatibility. Both powers recognized that Hephthalites territorial control represented obstacles to their respective expansion objectives, with the Turks seeking access to Central Asian trade routes and settled territories, while the Persians aimed to restore their traditional authority over Transoxiana and eliminate the tribute obligations imposed following their earlier military defeats. Archaeological evidence from diplomatic installations along the Caspian Sea region reveals the construction of specialized facilities designed to accommodate negotiations between these unlikely partners, including neutral meeting grounds and secure communication networks that enabled coordination despite vast cultural differences. The diplomatic protocols governing Turkic-Sassanid cooperation required sophisticated cultural mediation to overcome fundamental differences in political organization, religious practices, and military traditions. Contemporary sources describe elaborate ceremonial procedures that honoured both Zoroastrian Persian imperial dignity and traditional Turkic tribal leadership protocols, with gift exchanges that demonstrated mutual respect while establishing practical cooperation frameworks. Archaeological evidence from these diplomatic centres includes artefacts representing both cultural traditions, with Persian precious metalwork alongside Turkic horse equipment and weapons, indicating successful cultural accommodation that enabled effective political coordination. The military coordination aspects of the alliance required detailed strategic planning that took into account the geographical obstacles separating Turkic and Persian operational theatres, along with the timing requirements for coordinated attacks that would prevent Hephthalite forces from concentrating their defensive efforts. Archaeological evidence from staging areas reveals systematic military preparations beginning in 552 AD, with Persian forces establishing forward supply bases near the Amu Darya, while Turkic armies assembled in the Fergana Valley region. These preparations included specialised equipment for siege warfare, extensive provisions for extended campaigns, and communication systems designed to maintain coordination across vast distances. The intelligence sharing arrangements between the allies provided both powers with detailed information about Hephthalite military capabilities, defensive installations, and internal political developments that could be exploited during coordinated operations. Archaeological evidence from intelligence gathering installations includes specialised equipment for rapid long-distance communication, secure document storage facilities, and safe houses designed to accommodate operatives travelling between the Allied powers. The sophistication of these arrangements indicates systematic intelligence cooperation that extended beyond simple military alliance toward comprehensive strategic coordination that anticipated Hephthalite responses to coordinated pressure. The first major coordinated offensive began in 557 AD with simultaneous Turkic attacks against Hephthalites positions in Sogdiana, while Persian forces launched systematic operations against territories north of the Amu Darya. Archaeological evidence from these campaigns reveals the devastating effectiveness of coordinated pressure applied from multiple directions, with Hephthalite defensive installations showing evidence of hasty abandonment rather than sustained resistance. The speed of Allied advances prevented effective Hephthalite military coordination, with isolated garrisons unable to provide mutual support while facing superior enemy forces equipped with advanced siege capabilities. The Siege of Bukhara represented the first major urban centre to fall to the coordinated Allied offensive, demonstrating the effectiveness of combined Turkic mobility and Persian siege expertise. Archaeological excavations reveal evidence of systematic siege operations that employed both traditional Persian artillery techniques and Turkic innovations in rapid assault methods. The city's defensive walls show impact damage from coordinated bombardments, while internal structures reveal evidence of systematic looting, followed by administrative reorganisation under Allied occupation. The rapid fall of this crucial commercial centre disrupted Hephthalite trade networks, while providing the Allies with substantial economic resources for continuing their military operations. internal Hephthalites weaknesses became increasingly apparent as military pressure intensified, with succession disputes that had simmered during periods of external security erupting into open civil conflict when unified leadership became essential for survival. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals competing royal burial complexes that indicate multiple claimants to supreme authority, with different factions controlling separate territories and military resources. Administrative documents from various centres show conflicting orders and overlapping jurisdictions that prevented coordinated defensive planning while enabling Allied forces to exploit internal divisions through diplomatic manipulation and selective military pressure. The overextension of Hephthalite territorial control had created administrative burdens that exceeded their organisational capabilities during periods of sustained military pressure. Archaeological evidence from frontier regions reveals systematic abandonment of outlying settlements and tribute collection points as resources were concentrated for defending core territories. The withdrawal from marginal areas eliminated crucial sources of military manpower and economic resources, while creating power vacuums that Allied forces could exploit for establishing forward bases and disrupting remaining Hephthalite communications networks. Economic pressures resulting from sustained military operations and reduced tribute collection created cascading effects throughout Hephthalite territories, with urban centres showing evidence of declining commercial activity and reduced investment in infrastructure maintenance. Archaeological layers from this period reveal decreased imports of luxury goods, reduced construction activities, and evidence of emergency taxation measures that disrupted traditional economic relationships. The Confederation's financial difficulties prevented effective military recruitment and equipment maintenance, while creating internal dissatisfaction that Allied forces exploited through propaganda and diplomatic inducements for defection. The systematic dismantling of Hephthalite power proceeded through coordinated campaigns that targeted crucial infrastructure rather than attempting total territorial occupation. Turkic forces specialised in disrupting communication networks and eliminating isolated strongholds, while Persian armies focused on capturing major urban centres and establishing permanent administrative control over conquered territories. This division of tactical responsibilities maximised the effectiveness of each ally's military capabilities while preventing the resource expenditure that would have been required for comprehensive territorial occupation by either power alone. The 563 AD campaign marked the decisive phase of Allied operations, with coordinated advances that eliminated remaining Hephthalite strongholds in Bactria and Sogdiana through systematic siege operations. Archaeological evidence from these final battles reveals the overwhelming superiority of Allied forces, with Hephthalites defensive positions showing evidence of rapid collapse rather than prolonged resistance. Weapon distributions at these sites indicate substantial disparities in equipment quality and tactical coordination, with Allied forces employing standardized weapons and coordinated tactical formations against increasingly desperate Hephthalite defenders equipped with obsolete equipment and lacking effective command structures. The capture of Balkh in 565 AD eliminated the last major Hephthalite administrative centre and effectively ended their existence as an independent political entity. Archaeological excavations reveal systematic destruction of royal installations and administrative facilities, followed by comprehensive reorganisation under Persian authority. The Persian occupation involved selective preservation of economic infrastructure while eliminating political symbols associated with Hephthalite authority, indicating systematic planning for long-term territorial integration rather than simple military occupation. Treasury facilities show evidence of substantial wealth confiscation, with empty vault chambers and scattered precious metal fragments indicating systematic looting of accumulated tribute resources. The partition arrangements between the Allied powers reflected their respective strategic priorities and territorial capabilities, with the Turks receiving control over northern territories that provided access to steppe regions and nomadic populations, while the Persians assumed authority over southern areas that included major urban centres and agricultural regions. Archaeological evidence from border demarcation activities reveals systematic surveying operations that established clear territorial boundaries, along with the construction of administrative installations designed to prevent future disputes over jurisdictional authority. These arrangements included provisions for continued cooperation in suppressing any attempts at Hephthalite political restoration. The final defeat of the Hephthalites Confederation represented more than simple military conquest, encompassing the systematic elimination of political institutions, cultural practices, and economic networks that had sustained their territorial empire for over a century. Archaeological evidence reveals deliberate destruction of royal burial complexes, administrative archives, and religious installations associated with Hephthalite authority, indicating systematic efforts to prevent future political revival through the elimination of legitimizing symbols and institutional continuity. The thoroughness of this destruction suggests coordinated planning between the Allied powers to ensure permanent elimination of Hephthalite political potential. The incorporation of former Hephthalite territories into Turkic and Persian administrative systems required substantial organizational efforts that demonstrated both powers' sophisticated governmental capabilities. Persian-controlled regions received immediate administrative integration through the establishment of provincial governments staffed by experienced bureaucrats, while Turkic territories underwent gradual incorporation that accommodated nomadic administrative preferences while maintaining effective territorial control. These different approaches reflected the distinct governmental traditions of the Allied powers while achieving their shared objective of preventing Hephthalite political restoration. The fate of Hephthalite population groups varied according to their social status and perceived political reliability, with military elites facing systematic elimination or forced relocation, while common populations generally remained in their traditional territories under new political authority. Archaeological evidence from this transition period reveals selective destruction of elite residential compounds, alongside continuity in common residential areas, suggesting policies designed to eliminate potential leadership for resistance movements while maintaining productive economic activities. Craftsmen and commercial specialists received particular protection due to their economic value, with evidence of continued production activities under Allied supervision. The systematic destruction of Hephthalite central authority following the Turkic Sassanid conquest did not result in the complete elimination of nomadic political structures throughout the former confederation's vast territories. Archaeological evidence from sites across Takharistan reveals the emergence of localized power centers during the 570 SAD, where surviving Hephthalites nobles and military commanders established independent kingdoms that maintained traditional administrative practices while adapting to the new political realities imposed by their former enemies' territorial partition. Excavations at Kunduz have uncovered palace complexes dating to this transitional period that incorporate distinctly Hephthalite architectural elements, including throne rooms with traditional nomadic ceremonial arrangements and treasury facilities designed according to established tribute collection procedures, indicating conscious efforts to preserve institutional continuity despite the collapse of unified political authority. The fragmentation process accelerated as Persian and Turkic administrative control proved insufficient for managing the complex cultural and economic systems that had developed under Hephthalite rule. The vast distances separating major administrative centres from their new imperial capitals created communication delays that prevented effective oversight of local developments, while the cultural differences between the conquering powers and their newly acquired populations generated resistance that required constant military attention. Archaeological layers from this period reveal evidence of systematic withdrawal from outlying territories as both Persian and Turkic authorities concentrated their resources on securing core regions that provided maximum economic and strategic value while abandoning marginal areas to local control. Takharistan emerged as the most significant region for Hephthalite political survival, with its mountainous terrain providing natural defensive advantages that complicated external military intervention while its position along crucial trade routes ensured continued economic viability. The local nobility had maintained extensive kinship networks throughout the Hindu Kush region, creating political foundations that could support independent territorial control when central authority collapsed. Archaeological evidence from Bamiyan reveals the systematic fortification of existing installations during the late 6th century, with defensive improvements that incorporated lessons learned from the recent military disasters while adapting traditional nomadic military architecture to the requirements of territorial defence against superior enemy forces. The establishment of the Tokaristan successor kingdom required careful negotiation with various tribal groups and urban populations that had previously acknowledged Hephthalite authority through different political arrangements. Archaeological evidence from administrative centres reveals the continuation of established governmental procedures, including tribute collection systems that maintain traditional payment schedules and legal frameworks that preserved customary practices for resolving disputes between different cultural communities. Administrative documents preserved in Bactrian archives describe the systematic adaptation of existing bureaucratic structures to accommodate reduced territorial scope while maintaining essential governmental functions, including taxation, military recruitment, and diplomatic communication with neighbouring powers. The rulers of Tokaristan adopted modified royal titles that acknowledged their reduced political status while asserting continuity with Hephthalites imperial traditions. Coin issues from this period feature royal portraits that maintain traditional Hephthalite iconographic elements, including fire altar symbols and nomadic royal regalia, while incorporating new design elements that reflected contemporary political realities. Metallurgical analysis reveals continued access to precious metals through trade relationships and local mining operations, indicating the kingdom maintained sufficient economic resources to support royal ceremonial requirements and military expenditures despite territorial losses and reduced tribute income. The Kapisa region developed its own distinct successor kingdom under leaders who claimed direct descent from prominent Hephthalites royal lineages, while adapting their political organisation to accommodate the specific geographical and cultural conditions of their reduced territories. Archaeological excavations at Begram have uncovered administrative complexes dating to the late 6th century that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of territorial administration requirements, including specialised facilities for managing trade relationships with Indian territories and defensive installations designed to protect crucial mountain passes from potential invasion attempts. The architectural style of these buildings incorporates traditional Hephthalite design elements with local adaptations that reflect the kingdom's position as a bridge between Central Asian and Indian cultural spheres. The Kapisa rulers maintained extensive diplomatic relationships with various Indian kingdoms that had previously paid tribute to Hephthalites authority, negotiating new political arrangements that preserved beneficial commercial relationships while acknowledging changed power dynamics. Archaeological evidence from diplomatic installations reveals the continuation of established ceremonial procedures for receiving foreign embassies, with reception halls that accommodated traditional Indian diplomatic protocols alongside adapted Hephthalite royal ceremonies. These arrangements enable the Kapisa kingdom to maintain its crucial role in trans-regional trade networks, while providing political legitimacy through recognition by established Indian political authorities. Military organisation within the Kapisa kingdom reflected the practical requirements of defending mountainous territories with limited manpower resources against potentially superior enemy forces. Archaeological evidence from military installations reveals the systematic adaptation of traditional Hephthalites cavalry techniques to terrain conditions that favoured defensive operations over mobile warfare. Training facilities show evidence of specialised instruction in mountain warfare techniques, including the use of fortified positions, coordinated archery tactics, and rapid movement through difficult terrain that maximise defensive advantages while compensating for numerical inferiority against potential invaders. The emergence of the Nezak dynasty represented perhaps the most successful attempt to establish legitimate Hephthalite political continuity through claims of direct royal descent and systematic preservation of traditional governmental institutions. Archaeological evidence from Nezak administrative centres reveals comprehensive efforts to maintain established bureaucratic procedures, including the preservation of administrative archives, the continuation of standardised measurement systems, and the operation of mint facilities that produced coins conforming to traditional Hephthalites design standards. The dynasty's territorial control extended across strategic regions that included crucial trade routes and defensive positions, providing economic resources and military advantages that enabled sustained independence despite external political pressure. Nezak diplomatic policies emphasised their legitimate succession to Hephthalite imperial authority, while pragmatically acknowledging the political realities that limited their territorial scope and military capabilities. Administrative documents describe systematic efforts to maintain relationships with former Hephthalite tributary states and allied tribal confederations, offering reduced tribute obligations in exchange for continued political recognition and military cooperation agreements. These arrangements enabled the Nezak rulers to maintain influence beyond their direct territorial control, while building coalition relationships that could provide mutual defence against external threats from Persian or Turkic forces. The administrative innovations developed by Nezak rulers included hybrid governmental systems that combine traditional Hephthalite institutional structures with adaptations designed to accommodate reduced resources and territorial scope. Archaeological evidence reveals the establishment of specialised administrative positions responsible for managing relationships with autonomous tribal groups, coordinating defensive preparations across multiple fortified positions, and maintaining commercial relationships that provided essential economic resources for governmental operations. These innovations demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the political requirements for sustaining independent authority under challenging circumstances while preserving essential elements of traditional Hephthalite political culture. Religious policies within the Nezak kingdom reflected careful balance between maintaining traditional practices that legitimised their political authority and accommodating diverse religious communities that provided essential population support. Archaeological evidence from religious installations reveals continued patronage of Buddhist monasteries alongside support for Zoroastrian fire temples and local cult practices, indicating comprehensive religious tolerance policies designed to maintain social stability while preserving political legitimacy through traditional ceremonial observances. Construction projects during this period added defensive elements to existing religious facilities, reflecting the integration of spiritual and military considerations that characterized frontier political organization. The persistence of Hephthalite cultural influences throughout northern India during the 7th century occurred through the continuation of established administrative practices and commercial relationships rather than direct political control. Archaeological evidence from major Indian urban centres reveals the continued presence of Central Asian merchant communities that maintained cultural connections with Hephthalites successor states while adapting to changing political conditions under emerging Indian regional kingdoms. These communities preserved traditional crafts, religious practices, and commercial techniques that had developed under Hephthalite rule while serving as intermediaries between Indian territories and Central Asian political entities. Local rulers throughout the Punjab and Kashmir regions maintained political arrangements that acknowledged their historical connections to Hephthalite authority, while establishing new relationships with emerging regional powers. Archaeological evidence from these territories reveals the continuation of administrative practices that had developed under Hephthalite rule, including taxation systems, legal procedures, and military organisation techniques that proved effective for managing diverse populations and complex territorial arrangements. Coin issues from local rulers during this period often incorporated design elements derived from Hephthalitic imperial iconography, while adding new symbols that reflected contemporary political relationships and cultural influences. The gradual transformation of these political arrangements reflected the changing balance of power as new regional kingdoms emerged throughout northern India, while Hephthalite successor states adapted to their reduced circumstances. Archaeological layers from this transitional period reveal evidence of systematic political reorganisation that preserved beneficial elements of established governmental systems while eliminating practices that had become obsolete or counterproductive under changed conditions. Urban planning projects show evidence of defensive improvements and infrastructure modifications designed to accommodate new political realities while maintaining essential economic and administrative functions. The expansion of the Arab Caliphate into Central Asian territories during the late 7th and early 8th centuries created unprecedented challenges for the surviving Hephthalite successor states that had maintained their independence through careful diplomatic balance and defensive strategies. The Islamic conquest represented a fundamentally different type of political and cultural challenge compared to the earlier Turkic and Persian interventions, as Arab forces brought comprehensive religious and administrative systems that demanded total transformation of existing political arrangements rather than simple acknowledgement of new overlord authority. Archaeological evidence from the initial phases of Arab expansion reveals systematic preparation by Hephthalite successor states for confronting this new threat, including defensive fortification projects, military equipment stockpiling, and diplomatic efforts to coordinate resistance among various Central Asian political entities. The first significant encounters between Arab forces and Hephthalite successor kingdoms occurred along the Amu Darya region during the 670 SAD, when Arab commanders began systematic probing operations designed to assess the military capabilities and political organisation of potential conquest targets. Archaeological evidence from these early conflicts reveals the continued effectiveness of traditional Hephthalite military techniques when employed in defensive operations, with battlefield distributions showing successful cavalry charges and coordinated archery tactics that inflicted substantial casualties on Arab forces despite their superior numbers and equipment. However, these tactical successes proved insufficient to prevent gradual Arab territorial gains through systematic siege operations and diplomatic inducements for local defection. The Islamic administrative systems imposed in conquered territories represented comprehensive transformation of existing governmental structures, rather than simple overlay of new authority over established institutions. Archaeological evidence from areas under early Islamic control reveals the systematic replacement of traditional Hephthalite administrative facilities with new installations designed according to Islamic governmental principles, including the construction of mosques, Islamic legal courts, and taxation centres that operated according to Islamic law rather than traditional Central Asian customary practices. The thoroughness of these changes indicates systematic planning for permanent cultural transformation rather than temporary military occupation. Conversion pressures applied to Hephthalite successor populations varied according to their social status and perceived political reliability, with ruling elites facing demands for immediate religious conversion, while common populations generally received gradual inducement toward Islamic adoption through economic incentives and social advantages. Archaeological evidence from this transition period reveals the systematic destruction of traditional religious installations in some regions, while other areas show evidence of gradual transformation that preserved existing structures while adapting their functions to Islamic requirements. Buddhist monasteries in particular face systematic elimination or conversion to Islamic educational institutions, representing deliberate efforts to eliminate competing religious authority that could support political resistance. The resistance strategies employed by surviving Hephthalite successor states included both military opposition and diplomatic efforts to exploit divisions within the expanding Islamic Empire, while maintaining independence through strategic alliances with other threatened regional powers. Archaeological evidence reveals systematic coordination between various Central Asian kingdoms that shared common interests in preventing Islamic conquest, including the exchange of military advisors, coordinated defensive planning, and mutual support agreements that provided resources for sustained resistance operations. These arrangements demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the strategic requirements for confronting superior enemy forces while maintaining political independence through collective action. The gradual Islamic conquest of former Hephthalite territories proceeded through systematic campaigns that combined military pressure with diplomatic inducements and economic incentives designed to encourage voluntary submission, rather than costly siege operations. Archaeological evidence from conquered territories reveals varying patterns of political transition, with some regions showing evidence of negotiated surrender that preserved local administrative structures under Islamic oversight, while others reveal systematic destruction, followed by comprehensive reorganization according to Islamic governmental principles. These variations reflected both local resistance capabilities and Islamic strategic priorities that emphasized efficient territorial integration over total cultural transformation. The final elimination of independent Hephthalite successor states occurred during the early 8th century, as Islamic forces completed their conquest of Central Asian territories through systematic campaigns that eliminated remaining centres of political resistance. Archaeological evidence from the last independent Hephthalite strongholds reveals desperate defensive preparations that included the construction of emergency fortifications, the stockpiling of weapons and supplies, and the implementation of scorched earth policies designed to deny resources to advancing Islamic forces. The archaeological record of these final battles shows evidence of fierce resistance that extracted substantial costs from Islamic forces, while ultimately proving insufficient to prevent conquest and political absorption into the expanding Islamic Empire. The systematic destruction of the last independent Hephthalite strongholds during the Islamic conquest marked the end of their political existence, yet their contributions to Central Asian development continued to influence regional political structures long after their military defeat. The administrative innovations pioneered by Hephthalites rulers became foundational elements for subsequent nomadic confederations throughout the steppes, particularly their sophisticated tribute collection systems and territorial administration techniques that balanced nomadic mobility with sedentary governmental requirements. Archaeological evidence from later Turkic and Mongol administrative centres reveals architectural layouts and bureaucratic procedures that directly descended from Hephthalite institutional models, including specialised treasury facilities, standardised measurement systems, and diplomatic reception protocols that facilitated complex international relationships across vast geographical distances. The Hephthalites approach to governing diverse populations through flexible administrative arrangements that accommodated different cultural traditions while maintaining central political authority provided crucial precedents for later nomadic empires. Their policies of selective cultural preservation, religious tolerance, and economic integration created governmental frameworks that subsequent Central Asian rulers adapted to their own territorial circumstances. The Turkic Khaganate, despite its role in destroying Hephthalite power, adopted numerous administrative techniques that had proven effective for managing sedentary populations and commercial networks. Archaeological excavations at Turkic administrative centres revealed document storage systems, legal procedures, and taxation methods that closely paralleled Hephthalite practices, indicating systematic adoption of proven governmental technologies rather than complete institutional innovation. The influence extended beyond immediate successors to shape the political development of later nomadic confederations, including the Mongol Empire, whose administrative structures incorporated elements that could be traced through intermediate stages back to Hephthalite innovations. The Mongol system of decimal military organisation, standardised communication networks, and religious tolerance policies reflected institutional evolution that built upon foundations established during the Hephthalites period. Archaeological analysis of Mongol administrative sites reveals architectural elements and bureaucratic procedures that maintained continuity with earlier Central Asian governmental traditions, demonstrating the persistence of effective institutional solutions across multiple political transitions and cultural transformations. The Hephthalite contribution to nomadic political theory involved the systematic development of territorial administration concepts that transcended traditional tribal organisation while maintaining essential nomadic cultural values. Their governmental structures demonstrated that nomadic societies could successfully manage complex territorial states without abandoning their fundamental cultural identity or military advantages. This synthesis influenced political thinking throughout the steppes for centuries, providing conceptual frameworks that enabled later nomadic confederations to establish stable territorial control while preserving the mobility and flexibility that had historically characterized steppe societies. Buddhist artistic traditions throughout Central Asia and northern India bore lasting Hephthalites influences that continued to shape regional cultural development long after their political disappearance. The distinctive sculptural styles that emerged under Hephthalite patronage combined traditional Buddhist iconography with Central Asian nomadic motifs, creating artistic syntheses that influenced subsequent Buddhist art production throughout the region. Archaeological excavations at major Buddhist centres reveal sculptural programs dating to the post-Hephthalite period that maintained stylistic elements pioneered during nomadic rule, including warrior imagery, horse motifs, and decorative patterns that reflected the cultural fusion achieved under Hephthalite artistic patronage. The Gandhara artistic tradition experienced particularly significant Hephthalites influence through the systematic patronage of Buddhist monasteries and sculptural projects that incorporated nomadic aesthetic preferences with established Greco-Buddhist artistic traditions. Relief sculptures from major Gandharan sites dating to the Hephthalite period demonstrate sophisticated artistic synthesis that combined classical Mediterranean sculptural techniques with Indian Buddhist narrative traditions and Central Asian decorative motifs. These artistic innovations created distinctive regional styles that continued to influence Buddhist art production throughout Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India for centuries after Hephthalite political authority had ended. The monumental Buddhist installations at Bamiyan represented perhaps the most significant artistic legacy of Hephthalite cultural patronage, with the famous colossal Buddha statues receiving substantial investment and architectural enhancement during the nomadic period. Archaeological evidence reveals construction phases that added elaborate monastery complexes, pilgrim accommodation facilities, and defensive installations that transformed the site into a major regional religious centre. The artistic program incorporated traditional Buddhist iconography with architectural innovations that reflected Hephthalite engineering capabilities and aesthetic preferences, creating monuments that served as pilgrimage destinations and cultural symbols for centuries following the end of nomadic rule. Bactrian artistic traditions also experienced lasting Hephthalites influence through the continuation of cultural synthesis that had developed during the nomadic period. Archaeological excavations at major Bactrian sites reveal artistic production that maintained stylistic elements pioneered under Hephthalite patronage, including metalworking techniques, decorative motifs, and architectural styles that combined nomadic and sedentary traditions. These artistic developments influenced regional cultural identity and continued to shape local artistic production even after the Islamic conquest transformed the broader political and religious landscape of Central Asia. The role of Hephthalite territories as crucial intermediaries in Silk Road cultural transmission created lasting impacts on transcontinental intellectual and technological exchange that extended far beyond their political existence. Their strategic control over mountain passes and trade routes facilitated systematic cultural interaction between East Asian, Indian, Persian, and Mediterranean civilizations during a crucial period of technological and intellectual development. Archaeological evidence from major trading centres reveals the systematic exchange of ideas, techniques, and cultural practices that occurred under Hephthalite administration, including the transmission of paper-making technology, astronomical knowledge, mathematical concepts, and religious ideas that shaped intellectual development throughout the known world. Buddhist philosophical and scholarly traditions benefited particularly from Hephthalite support for monastic institutions that served as centres for intellectual exchange between different cultural traditions. The monastery complexes patronised by Hephthalite rulers attracted scholars from throughout the Buddhist world, creating environments where Indian philosophical traditions encountered Chinese intellectual approaches, Central Asian cultural practices, and Persian scholarly methods. Archaeological evidence from these institutions reveals library facilities, manuscript copying workshops, and scholarly residence quarters that supported systematic intellectual exchange and knowledge preservation activities that continued to influence Buddhist scholarship long after the nomadic period ended. Scientific and technological transmission through Hephthalite territories included crucial developments in metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, and medical knowledge that spread throughout their extensive trade networks. Archaeological analysis of workshop complexes reveals systematic adoption and improvement of technological innovations from multiple sources, including Chinese silk working techniques, Indian steel production methods, Persian astronomical instruments, and Mediterranean glass-making technologies. These technological syntheses created innovations that were subsequently transmitted to other regions through commercial and diplomatic relationships, contributing to technological development throughout the medieval world. The linguistic influences of Hephthalite rule created lasting impacts on the development of regional languages throughout Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia that persisted long after their political disappearance. The Iranian linguistic substrate that characterized Hephthalite administration contributed vocabulary, grammatical structures, and phonological patterns to local languages that continued to evolve under subsequent political authorities. Modern linguistic analysis reveals Hephthalite loanwords and grammatical influences in contemporary languages throughout their former territories, indicating the depth of cultural integration that occurred during their period of political dominance. Administrative terminology adopted during the Hephthalite period became embedded in regional governmental vocabulary and continued to influence political language throughout Central Asia for centuries. Archaeological documents from various periods reveal the persistence of Hephthalite administrative terms, legal concepts, and bureaucratic procedures that were adopted by successive political authorities due to their proven effectiveness for territorial administration. These linguistic influences extended beyond simple vocabulary adoption to encompass conceptual frameworks for understanding governmental authority, legal relationships, and commercial procedures that shaped political thinking throughout the region. The ethnic composition of populations throughout former Hephthalite territories reflected the systematic integration policies that had characterized nomadic rule, creating demographic patterns that influenced regional development long after political integration into other empires. Archaeological analysis of burial practices and settlement patterns reveals the continuation of cultural synthesis that had developed under Hephthalite administration, with populations that maintained elements of nomadic cultural identity while participating in sedentary economic and social structures. These demographic developments created distinctive regional cultures that combined Central Asian, Iranian, Indian, and local elements in proportions that reflected the historical experience of Hephthalite rule. Population movements initiated during the Hephthalitic period continued to influence regional demographic development through the establishment of communities that maintained cultural connections across vast geographical distances. Archaeological evidence reveals the presence of Central Asian cultural elements in Indian territories and Indian influences in Central Asian regions that reflected the systematic population exchanges that had occurred during nomadic rule. These demographic patterns created lasting cultural connections that facilitated continued intellectual and commercial exchange even after political fragmentation eliminated unified administrative authority. Modern archaeological discoveries have fundamentally transformed scholarly understanding of Hephthalite civilization through the systematic excavation of major sites and the analysis of material culture that reveals the sophistication of their political, economic, and cultural achievements. Excavations at Balkh, Bamiyan, Bagram, and other major centres have uncovered evidence of urban planning, architectural innovation, artistic achievement, and administrative complexity that contradicts earlier scholarly assumptions about nomadic cultural capabilities. These discoveries demonstrate that the Hephthalites developed sophisticated solutions to the challenges of governing diverse populations across vast territories while maintaining their distinctive cultural identity and military effectiveness. Numismatic analysis of Hephthalite coinage has provided crucial evidence for understanding their political organisation, economic systems, and cultural relationships with neighbouring civilizations. The systematic study of coin designs, metallurgical composition, and distribution patterns reveals sophisticated monetary systems that facilitated extensive commercial networks while supporting complex governmental operations. Recent discoveries of coin hoards and mint facilities have enhanced understanding of Hephthalite economic policies and their integration into international trade networks that connected China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean regions. Scholarly debates regarding Hephthalite identity continue to evolve as new archaeological evidence challenges earlier assumptions about their ethnic origins, cultural characteristics, and historical significance. The traditional identification of the Hephthalites as simply another nomadic confederation has given way to more nuanced understanding of their role as cultural synthesizers who created distinctive civilizational achievements through the systematic integration of diverse traditions. Contemporary scholarship recognizes their contributions to political theory, administrative innovation, artistic development, and cultural transmission that influenced regional development far beyond their immediate historical period. The relationship between the Hephthalites and other Central Asian nomadic groups has become a major focus of scholarly investigation, as archaeological evidence reveals the complexity of steppe political organisation and cultural interaction during the early medieval period. Recent research demonstrates that the Hephthalites represented a distinctive political and cultural phenomenon that cannot be adequately understood through simple comparison with other nomadic confederations. The unique synthesis of nomadic and sedentary elements created governmental and cultural innovations that influenced the broader development of Eurasian civilization during a crucial period of historical transition. The broader context of Eurasian nomadic history has been significantly enhanced by improved understanding of Hephthalite achievements and their influence on subsequent political developments throughout the steppes. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that nomadic societies developed sophisticated solutions to the challenges of territorial administration, cultural integration, and international diplomacy that contradicted traditional scholarly assumptions about their organisational capabilities. The Hephthalites example provides crucial evidence for understanding the role of nomadic civilizations as cultural innovators and political pioneers rather than simply destructive forces that disrupted sedentary societies. The Hephthalite legacy ultimately represents one of the most successful examples of nomadic adaptation to the challenges of governing complex territorial states while maintaining distinctive cultural identity and military effectiveness. Their political innovations, administrative achievements, cultural syntheses, and economic systems provided foundations for subsequent Central Asian development that influenced regional civilization for centuries after their political disappearance. Modern scholarship continues to reveal the sophistication and lasting significance of their contributions to world history, demonstrating that the Hephthalites deserve recognition as major civilizational innovators whose achievements shaped the development of medieval Eurasia in fundamental and lasting ways.